Hey guys, tonight we're climbing 100 feet above the streets of a 19th century city to spend an entire day watching for smoke. You're perched in a cramped fire watch tower, scanning endless rooftops through a brass telescope, your hand never far from the alarm bell rope that could save thousands of lives or trigger a very embarrassing false alarm. The reality check? You're doing one of the era's most monotonous jobs for wages that barely cover rent, and if you doze off for even 5 minutes, an entire neighborhood might burn to the ground before anyone notices. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from and what time it is in your part of the world. I'm always curious who's joining me for these late night history sessions. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The alarm clock rattles at 4:30 in the morning, dragging you from sleep in your cramped tenement apartment. You're already calculating whether you have time to splash cold water on your face or if you need to sprint directly to the tower. The answer, as usual, is sprint. Your shift begins at 5 o'clock sharp, and the foreman has made it abundantly clear that tardiness results in docked pay sometimes, an entire day's wages for being 10 minutes late. You pull on yesterday's shirt, still damp with sweat from your previous shift, and grab the tin lunch pail your wife packed last night. Cold potatoes and bread. Again, the streets are still dark as you hurry through the manufacturing district, your boots echoing off brick warehouses. A few factory workers stumble past you heading home from night shifts, their faces grey with exhaustion. The gas lamps cast weak yellow pools that barely push back the pre-dawn gloom. You pass the bakery on Merchant Street, already belching warmth, and the yeasty smell of rising Doto's bakers started work at 2 in the morning, which makes your 4:30 wake-up feel almost luxurious. Almost. The Firewatch Tower looms ahead, a skeletal iron structure that reminds you of a lighthouse dropped onto dry land. It rises 7 stories above the surrounding buildings, a spindly monument to civic paranoia about conflagrations. And honestly, that paranoia is completely justified. Historians still argue whether American cities in the 1870s and 1880s lost more buildings to fire than they constructed new ones, but the statistics are genuinely terrifying. Chicago, Boston, Baltimore, every major city has its catastrophic fire story, and your tower exists to make sure this city doesn't add its name to that list. You unlock the iron gate at the tower's base and begin the ascent. The spiral staircase is barely wide enough for your shoulders, and the steps are perforated iron that lets you see all the way down to the ground, not ideal if you're afraid of heights, which you absolutely are, but would never admit. Your thighs start burning around the 3rd-story landing. By the 5th story, you're breathing hard, gripping the rail, and questioning your career choices. The tower sways slightly in the morning breeze, which is either normal structural flex or a catastrophic engineering failure. You've decided not to think too hard about which. The watchman you're relieving, old Pete, is waiting at the top landing. He looks like he hasn't slept in 3 days, which is probably accurate given he works the midnight to dawn shift. Quiet night, he grunts, already squeezing past you on the narrow platform. Winds from the northwest. Keep an eye on the tannery district, some idiots been burning trash after hours. You nod, knowing Pete will be asleep before he reaches the ground floor. You've worked that overnight shift before, and it does things to your sanity that aren't easily reversed. You push through the trap door into the tower carver, wooden octagonal room barely 10 feet across, with windows on all 8 sides. The space smells like coal smoke, old coffee, and Pete's terrible pipe tobacco. The coal stove in the corner radiates blessed warmth, though maintaining it is technically your responsibility now. The telescope mounted on its swiveling brass base dominates the center of the room, pointing southeast toward the warehouse district. The bell rope hangs from the ceiling, disappearing up through another opening to the massive bronze bell mounted above your head. You set down your lunch pail and take your first real look at the city below. From up here, in the grey light of approaching dawn, it looks almost peaceful. Rows of brick buildings stretch to the horizon, their chimneys beginning to wake up, sending thin streams of smoke into the morning air. Church spires punctuate the residential neighbourhoods. The river snakes through the industrial zone, reflecting the sky like hammered pewter. It's beautiful, in a grim Industrial Revolution sort of way. The logbook lies open on the small wooden desk, Pete's spidery handwriting recording the night's events. 12,047 AM. Possible spark, northwest sector, resolved. 2015 AM cat, stuck on brewery roof, successfully ignored. 4033 AM, relieved by morning watch. You flick to a fresh page and write the date, your name, and 5000 AM watch begins. The city is your responsibility now. 700,000 souls spreading out below you like an intricate flammable puzzle. You crack your knuckles and stretch your back, feeling vertebrae pop. 12 hours up here. 12 hours of staring at rooftops, scanning for smoke, and trying not to go completely insane from boredom. At least the view's decent. And hey, Pete left half a pot of coffee on the stove. It tastes like boiled leather, but caffeine is caffeine. The sun breaks over the eastern rooftops, painting the smoke streams gold and pink. Time to work. You pour yourself a tin cup of Pete's leftover coffee and immediately regret it. The stuff has been stewing on the stove for probably 6 hours, transforming from beverage into something closer to coal tar. You drink it anyway, grimacing as the bitter sludge coats your tongue. Waste not, want not, that's the Watchman motto, mainly because the city pays you $9 a week and expects you to supply your own provisions. The coal stove needs attention. You unlatch the iron door and peer inside at the glowing embers Pete left you, adding a few small chunks from the bucket beside the desk. The Tower Authority provides the coal, at least, though they're stingy about it. You're allowed 1 bucket per shift, which means you need to ration carefully. Burn too much in the morning and you'll freeze by evening. Burn too little and you'll be numb-fingered and useless by noon. It's a delicate balance that took you 3 months to master. While the fresh coal catches, you rummage through your lunch pail. Your wife packed 2 thick slices of dark bread, a hunk of hard cheese wrapped in cloth, and 3 boiled eggs. That's breakfast, lunch, and dinner, sorted assuming you have the willpower not to devour everything by 10 o'clock. You also have a small tin of tea leaves, which means you can make proper, fresh tea once Pete's coffee disaster is finally gone. Small luxuries matter when you're trapped in a wooden box for half a day. You fill the battered kettle from the water. To get another item, you haul up those 100+ stairs every morning and set it on the stove. The city's starting to wake up properly now. Factory whistles pierce the dawn, their different pitches creating an industrial symphony that signals shift changes across the manufacturing districts. You count them automatically, the textile mill, the ironworks, the barrel cooperage, the glassworks. Each whistle has its own tone, and after 2 years in this tower, you know them all like church bells. Through the telescope, you watch the streets fill with workers. They pour out of tenement buildings like ants from a disturbed hill, dark figures hurrying toward their various factories and workshops. Horse-drawn wagons clatter over cobblestones, delivering coal and raw materials. A milk cart makes its rounds in the residential district, the driver stopping at familiar doorsteps. It's the same choreography every morning, thousands of people moving through their routines while you watch from above like some kind of industrial guardian angel. The kettle starts to sing. You measure out a careful pinch of tea, leaves you only get 1 tin per week, and it's already Thursday, and pour the steaming water. The aroma alone is worth the wait, earthy and slightly floral, cutting through the stale air of the cab. You cradle the cup in both hands and return to the windows, sipping slowly while your eyes continue their endless scan. Smoke is rising from hundreds of chimneys now. This is always the tricky part of the morning. Watch distinguishing normal domestic smoke from potential problems. Every household stove, every factory boiler, every workshop forge sends up its plume, creating a hazy canopy over the city. Your job is to spot the abnormal, smoke that's too dark, too thick, coming from the wrong location, or rising at the wrong angle. Historians still argue whether fire watchtowers actually prevented fires or just gave cities false confidence. But the insurance companies love them, and insurance companies run everything, so here you are. You take one of the boiled eggs and crack it against the desk edge, peeling away shell fragments while keeping your eyes on the warehouse district. That sector always makes you nervous. Timber warehouses packed with cotton, grain, turpentine, and other spectacularly flammable materials, all crammed together along the waterfront. One stray spark, and the whole district could go up like a Roman candle. The egg is perfectly cooked, the yolk just slightly soft in the center. Your wife is some kind of boiled egg wizard. She times them by saying the Lord's Prayer twice while they simmer, and it works every time. You eat it slowly, savoring the protein. Breakfast is the only meal you really enjoy up here. Lunch will be eaten while standing, eyes never leaving the windows. Dinner will be cold bread chewed mechanically while you're half asleep. A quirky fact about fire watch duty that nobody tells you during training: you develop an almost supernatural awareness of birds. Pigeons mostly, but also gulls near the waterfront and the occasional hawk. They swirl around the tower in unpredictable patterns, and at least once a week you'll spot a bird and think it's smoke, your heart lurching before your brain catches up. Pete told you he once rang the bell for a flock of starlings that happened to rise from a rooftop at exactly the wrong angle. The fire brigade was not amused. Pete was fined a day's wages. You finish your tea and rinse the cup in the small basin, using as little water as possible. Every drop you use is a drop you won't have for drinking later. The morning sun is fully up now, slanting through the eastern windows and warming the cab. In summer, this place becomes an actual oven by noon. In winter, the coal stove barely keeps your fingers from going numb. Today, mid-October, it's almost pleasant. You take a piece of bread and gnaw it while adjusting the telescope's angle, sweeping across the northern residential blocks. The bread is dense and sour, made from cheap rye flour, but it's filling. You're rationing Ithalf now, half for lunch. The cheese will be your afternoon reward if you make it to 3 o'clock without eating it out of sheer boredom. Below, a streetcar clatters along its rails, packed with morning commuters. Children spill out of tenement doorways, heading to the factory schools or, more likely, to their jobs in the textile mills. It's 1883, and child labour laws are still more theoretical than actual. You try not to think about it too much. Your own son will probably end up in a factory in a few years when he turns 9. At least up here, you don't have to watch him do it. The city hums with activity now, fully awake and churning, and you're just getting started. With breakfast settled and the morning routine established, you turn to the less glamorous part of your job, equipment inspection. The city requires a full systems check at the start of every shift, documented in the logbook with your initials. It's tedious, bureaucratic nonsense, except for the part where malfunctioning equipment during an actual fire could kill dozens of people, so you take it seriously. You start with a bell rope. It hangs from the ceiling like a thick braided serpent, disappearing through a circular opening into the bell chamber above. The rope is manila hemp, replaced every 6 months because the constant pulling and weather exposure degrades the fibers. You've seen what happens when a rope snaps middle-arm. Pete was working the day it happened 2 years ago, and apparently the frayed end whipped back through the opening and nearly took his eye out. You grasp the rope with both hands and give it a firm downward pull. The bell above responds with a deep, resonant bong that echoes across the entire city. You wince. It's 6:15 in the morning, and you've just woken up several thousand people who don't need to be awake yet. Somewhere below, you imagine angry citizens shaking their fists at your tower. The regulations require a test ring every shift, though, so they can shake their fists at the city council if they want someone to blame. You examine the rope carefully, running your hands along its length as far as you can reach, feeling for frayed spots or weak sections. The fibers are rough against your palms, still slightly damp from last night's humidity. Everything seems solid. Hell, you make a note in the logbook. Bell rope tested and sound, 6:15 a.m. Your handwriting is terrible, but at least it's legible, unlike Pete's spidery scrawl that looks like a spider died in an inkwell. Next comes the telescope. This is actually your favorite piece of equipment, a beautiful brass instrument mounted on a swiveling tripod base. It's a proper refracting telescope with a 4-inch objective lens, the same kind astronomers use, except you're looking down instead of up. The city paid $60 for this instrument, which is approximately what you earn in 6 weeks, so you treat it like the precious object it is. You crouch beside the eyepiece and peer through, aiming at a familiar landmark, the clock tower on the courthouse 3 blocks east. The brass clock face swims into focus, crisp and clear. You can read the Roman numerals, see the minute hand creeping toward the quarter hour. Perfect. You swing the telescope north, focusing on the rail yard, where you can count individual boxcars and read the company names painted on their sides. Still perfect. Now comes the tedious part, cleaning the lenses. You retrieve the special wooden box from under the desk, the one containing lens paper and cleaning solution. The front objective lens is exposed to all weather, and it collects dust, soot, and bird droppings with impressive efficiency. Today's accumulation is light, just a thin film of industrial grime. You apply a few drops of alcohol solution to the lens paper and wipe in gentle circular motions, the way the manual instructs. The glass squeaks slightly as it comes clean. The eyepiece lens requires equal attention. You unscrew the brass housing and carefully remove the small lens, holding it up to the morning light. A smudge of something, probably your own face oil from yesterday's marathon viewing session, mars the surface. More lens paper, more careful wiping. Historians still argue whether firewatch towers justified their expense, but you figure a telescope that can spot smoke plumes from 2 miles away probably tips the cost-benefit analysis in favor of worth it. You reassemble the eyepiece, test the focus knob to ensure it rotates smoothly, and make another logbook entry, telescope lenses cleaned, optics clear. Next thing you know, you'll be wearing a tie and carrying a pocket watch. The signal flags are stored in a wooden cabinet bolted to the north wall. You unlock it, the city is paranoid about vandals somehow climbing the tower and stealing flags, though what anyone would do with emergency signal flags is beyond you, and pull out the bundle. There are 6 flags in total, each a different color, each meaning something specific in the elaborate communication system the city has devised. Red flag, major fire, multiple companies required. Yellow flag, moderate fire, standard response. White flag, false alarm, stand down. Blue flag, fire in progress but under control. Black flag, extreme danger, evacuate nearby buildings. And the green flag, which you've never actually used, indicating a fire tower, emergency basically, meaning you're the one who needs help. You shake out each flag and inspect it for tears or fraying. The red flag has a small rip along one edge where it caught in the rigging during last month's windstorm, but someone, probably Petter, has sewn it back together with surprisingly neat stitches. The yellow flag is faded from sun exposure, more cream than yellow now, but still serviceable. The black flag is pristine because, thank God, you've never had to deploy it. Each flag attaches to a separate halyarda rope and pulley system that runs up the flagpole mounted on the tower's roof. You test each halyard by running them up and down, making sure the pulleys aren't seized. The blue flag's pulley squeaks alarmingly, and you make a mental note to oil it later. The last thing you need during an emergency is a stuck flag pulley while buildings burn below. Here's a quirky detail they don't mention in the training manual. The flags are made from wool bunting, the same material used for military colours, and they cost $3 each. That's a third of your weekly wages per flag. The city has backup flags stored in the fire marshal's office, but if you lose one off the tower, you can expect a severe lecture about fiscal responsibility. You bundle the flags back into the cabinet, lock it, and add to the logbook, signal flags inspected, halyards functional, blue pulley requires oil. You're running out of exciting things to inspect, which means you're about to enter the long, boring middle section of your shift, the actual watching part. You stretch your arms over your head, feeling your spine crack in 3 places. The coal stove purrs warmly. The city sprawls below, industrious and orderly. Everything is ready. Now you just have to stay awake for the next 11 hours. You settle into the wooden chair positioned at the west-facing window, the factory district side, and begin the real work. This is what you're actually paid for, staring at rooftops until your eyes burn. The scanning pattern is something you've developed over 2 years, a methodical sweep that covers the entire visible city in roughly 20-minute cycles. Start west, move north, sweep east, drift south, return to west. Repeat. Repeat. Repeat until your shift ends or you go quietly insane, whichever comes first. The factory district is always your primary concern. You can see 7 major industrial buildings from this angle, each with multiple smokestacks belching various shades of grey and black into the morning sky. The textile mill produces a light grey smoke that dissipates quickly. They burn anthracite coal, the expensive stuff. The ironworks, by contrast, pumps out thick black columns that hang in the air like vertical curtains. That's bituminous coal, cheaper and dirtier, but perfectly legal and perfectly normal. Your job is to know what's normal. That ironworks smoke? Normal. The bakery's white steam venting from its roof hatches? Normal. The glassworks' occasional orange-tinted emissions when they're running their furnaces hot? Totally normal. What's not normal is smoke that appears suddenly from a building that shouldn't be producing smoke, or smoke that changes colour rapidly, or smoke accompanied by visible flames, which seems obvious, but you'd be surprised how many people need this pointed out. You swing the telescope toward the warehouse district along the river. Through the lens, you can see longshoremen unloading a cargo ship, their movements ant-like at this distance. The warehouses themselves are mostly quiet. It's still early for commercial activity, but you scan their roof lines anyway. Historians still argue whether the Great Chicago Fire of 1871 could have been stopped by an alert watchman, but the truth is that fire moved so fast no bell tower in the world could have summoned help quickly enough. Still, you like to think you could at least give people a head start. A wisp of smoke catches your eye from the tannery district north-northwest. You pause, adjusting the telescope's focus. The smoke is coming from the Kellerman Tannery, a rambling brick complex that processes cowhides into leather. You watch for 30 seconds, analyzing. The smoke is greyish-white, rising steadily from a rooftop chimney. Probably they're rendering vats, boiling down fat and tissue. Disgusting process. Normal smoke. You make a mental note and move on. The residential neighbourhoods require a different scanning approach. Hundreds of chimneys, each sending up its morning cooking smoke. You're looking for outliers, smoke that's too dense, suggesting a chimney fire, or smoke coming from broken windows instead of chimneys, suggesting something worse. Most house fires start from cooking accidents or knocked over lamps, and by the time you spot them from up here, they're usually already beyond the throw a bucket of water on it stage. Your eyes drift to the church district, where 5 different steeples pierce the skyline. Churches are always a concern because they're built with soaring wooden frameworks inside those masonry walls, basically elaborate kindling wrapped in stone. You've heard stories about church fires, how the interior can be completely engulfed while the exterior still looks fine, and then the whole roof collapses inward like a failed soufflé. A quirky detail about your profession. In European cities, fire watch towers date back to medieval times, and the watchmen were often required to be bachelors because married men were considered too distracted to maintain proper vigilance. You're married with 2 children, which apparently disqualifies you from European standards, though your wife would probably argue you're plenty distracted anyway. You stand up and move to the north window, giving your eyes a break from the telescope. The naked eye scanning is almost as important as the magnified view. Sometimes your peripheral vision catches movement or colour changes that focused viewing misses. You let your gaze soften, taking in the whole panorama without concentrating on specifics. It's almost meditative, in a mind-numbing sort of way. A distant train whistle echoes across the city. You track the sound to the ray yard, where a locomotive is building up steam, its smokestack puffing white clouds in rhythmic bursts. Rail traffic is another smoke source you've learned to ignore. Locomotives, steamships on the river, even the new steam-powered fire engines the city purchased last year. They all produce dramatic smoke that looks alarming but is completely routine. The sun is higher now, warming the tower cab. You shed your coat and hang it on the peg beside the door. The temperature is already climbing toward uncomfortable, and it's only 7 in the morning. Summer shifts a brutalth. The wooden cab turns into a solar oven, and you spend 12 hours slowly roasting while watching the fortunate citizens below enjoy parks and river breezes. At least today is mild. You return to the telescope and aim toward the eastern residential blocks. Row houses stretch to the horizon, their uniform brick facades creating a geometric pattern that's almost hypnotic. You sweep slowly across them, checking each roof, each chimney, each alley. Nothing unusual, just a city waking up, cooking breakfast, starting its day. A pigeon lands on the windowsill, startling you. The bird cocks its head, studying you with one beady eye, then defecates on the sill and flies away. You add clean pigeon shit to your mental task list, right below oil blue flag pulley, and try not to die of boredom. The scanning continues. West to east, north to south, looking for smoke that doesn't belong. Your eyes are already starting to feel strained, and you're not even an hour into your shift. You blink hard, rub your face, and pick up the telescope eyepiece again. Somewhere down there, someone might be carelessly knocking over a lamp right now, or failing to properly extinguish their stove, or smoking in a hayloft because people are idiots. And when the smoke starts rising, you need to be watching. That's the job. That's the whole job. You scan, and scan, and scan, and scan. Around 7:30, you pull out the laminated card from your breast pocket and unfold it on the desk. It's dog-eared and stained with coffee rings, but the printed text is still legible. Municipal fire alarm code official, bell signals. This card is supposedly your Bible, though you've mostly memorized it by now. Still, the regulations require you to review it at the start of every shift, and you're nothing if not a rule follower. Well, mostly. The bell code system is simultaneously ingenious and completely insane. Instead of just ringing the bell and letting the fire brigades figure things out, the city has developed an elaborate pattern language that uses the number and spacing of bell strikes to communicate specific information. In theory, this allows fire companies to know exactly where to respond before they even leave their stations. In practice, it means you need to do mental math during emergencies while your hands are shaking with adrenaline. The basic structure is simple enough. The city is divided into 48 districts, each assigned a number. Your tower covers districts 12 through 30, only basically the entire central city and industrial zone. To signal a fire, you ring the district number using grouped strikes. So District 14 would be 1 strike, pause, 4 strikes. District 27, 2 strikes, pause, 7 strikes. Simple, right? Except it gets complicated immediately. A single round of district number rings indicates a minor fluorescence should be alert, but fire companies hold position unless specifically dispatched. 2 complete rounds of the district number means a working fire requiring immediate response from the nearest company. 3 rounds means multiple companies needed. Serious situation. 4 rounds, that's the "oh God, everything is burning" signal that sends every available company rolling toward the location. But wait, there's more, because of course there is. After ringing the district number, you're supposed to add severity codes. 3 rapid strikes means structural fire. 4 rapid strikes means factory or commercial building. 5 rapid strikes means waterfront or warehouse. Single slow strikes indicate residential. And here's the fun part. You need to maintain exact timing. The pause between group numbers should be exactly 5 seconds. The pause between complete rounds should be exactly 10 seconds. The rapid strikes should be approximately 1 second apart. You practice sometimes, counting in your head while pulling the rope, trying to maintain that precision. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Pull. 2, 3, you. 4, 5. Pull, 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 pull. It's like the world's most stressful percussion exercise, except if you mess up the rhythm, firefighters might go to the wrong location while buildings burn. Historians still argue whether these elaborate bell code systems actually improved response times or just added unnecessary complexity, but the insurance companies insisted on them. Something about standardized communication protocols reducing liability. You're pretty sure it was really about insurance executives enjoying the feeling of imposing order on chaos, even if that order was somewhat theoretical. Here's a quirky detail they don't put in the official manual. The bell codes were partly inspired by railway telegraph systems. A fire commissioner visited a railroad depot in 1868, saw how telegraphers used timed clicks to transmit complex messages, and thought, why not apply this to fire alarms? Apparently it never occurred to him that telegraph operators spend months training on their codes, while you got a single afternoon lecture and a laminated card. You trace your finger down the card, reviewing the special situation codes. 6 strikes means suspected arson, dat, and the fire marshal himself responds. 7 strikes means casualties reported. 8 strikes, which you've never heard in real life, means the fire tower itself is compromised and you need immediate evacuation. You're not even sure how that last one would work, since you'd need to be in the tower to ring the bell, but you'd presumably be fleeing the compromised tower. The logic seems circular. There's also a whole section on wind condition alerts. If you observe winds above 20 miles per hour during a fire, you're supposed to add 2 slow strikes at the end of your sequence to warn companies that the fire will spread rapidly. How are you supposed to measure wind speed? Good question. You're issued a wind gauge, basically a fancy weather vane with a speedometer, but it's mounted outside the tower and you'd need to lean out a window to read it during an emergency. So, mostly, you guess. The card also lists recall codes, which tell companies to return to station after a false alarm. That's 3 distinct strikes repeated 3 times, followed by the district number. You've had to ring that pattern more times than you'd care to admit, usually after panicking over bakery steam or someone burning leaves in their backyard. The fire companies hate recall codes almost as much as they hate false alarms, because they've already harnessed horses and rolled equipment into the street before you tell them it was a mistake. You refold the card and tuck it back in your pocket. The truth is, you could probably handle the basic codes in your sleep. District number, severity indicator, done. But the pressure of an actual emergency makes your brain turn to mush, and having the card gives you something solid to grab onto when you're trying not to panic. The city runs drills quarterly, where the fire marshal sends a smoke signal from a designated building and times how long it takes you to ring the correct code. Your record is 17 seconds from smoke spotted to code complete. Pete's record is 12 seconds, but Pete's been doing this job for 9 years and has hands like leather. You're still working on it. You stand and stretch, rolling your shoulders. The morning is progressing normally, which is to say, nothing is happening. The factory smoke continues its steady rise. The residential chimneys puff along. The city hums below like a well-oiled machine. And you're up here with your laminated card and your memorized codes, ready to ring a bell in precisely timed patterns if anything goes wrong. It's ridiculous, really, but it's also your job. And somewhere down there, fire companies are doing their morning equipment checks, trusting that if smoke appears, you'll know exactly which combination of bells to ring to bring them running to the right place. No pressure or anything. At 8:45, your routine scanning gets violently interrupted. You're sweeping the telescope across the commercial district when you spot it, a thick plume of white smoke rising from behind the hardware store on Market Street. Your heart immediately kicks into double time. That's not normal. That building shouldn't be producing smoke at all. It's a retail establishment, no furnaces, no boilers, nothing that generates emissions. You adjust the telescope focus. Your hands suddenly shaky. The smoke is billowing now, getting thicker, pouring upward in a dense column. It's coming from the alley behind the hardware store, or maybe from the building itself. Your mind races through the possibilities. Electrical fire? Overturned lamp in the stockroom? The hardware store sells turpentine and varnish highly flammable. If those go up, the whole block could catch. You lunge for the bell rope, your pulse hammering in your ears. This is it. This is the real thing. You've practiced the codes 100 times, and now you need to execute perfectly. Market Street is in District 19. The code is 1 strike, pause, 9 strikes. Twice through for a working fire. Then 4 rapid strikes for commercial building. You grasp the rope with both hands and pull. Bong. The bell's resonance shakes through your entire body. You count-tone 2, 3, 4, 5 and pull again. Bong, 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 bong. 9 strikes. Rapid fire. Your arms burning with effort. Each pull requires your full body weight and the rope chafes your palms even through the calluses. Tensing pause. You're breathing hard, staring out the window at that smoke plume which seems even thicker now. Your brain is screaming that you made the right call. That's definitely smoke. That's definitely a fire. You're doing your job. Second round. Bong. Bong, 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 bong. It's 1 iron again. Now the severity code. 4 rapid strikes for commercial. You yank the rope in quick succession. Bong, 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 and release it, stepping back. The echoes die away across the city. In fire stations throughout your coverage area, alarm bells are now ringing in response to your signal. Companies are mobilizing. Horses are being harnessed to steam pumpers. Men are pulling on their gear. You set the entire emergency response system in motion. You grab the telescope and refocus on Market Street, your hands still trembling. The smoke is, wait. You squint through the eyepiece, adjusting the focus knob. The smoke is starting to thin, and it's not grey-black like combustion smoke. It's pure white, almost translucent. And it's not coming from the hardware store at Allett's, coming from the bakery next door. Oh no, oh no, no, no. You watch with growing horror as the smoke dissipates into harmless steam. Through the telescope you can see the bakery's back door standing open, probably for ventilation. They're baking bread. They're just baking bread, and the steam from their ovens is venting out the back door, and you just sent every fire company in the district rolling toward a completely non-existent emergency. Shit, you mutter, which is unprofessional but accurate. You yank the recall code card from your pocket with shaking hands. 3 distinct strikes, repeated 3 times, followed by District 19. That's the "never mind false alarm, please don't murder me" signal. You grab the rope and ring out the recall. Bong, bong, bong. Pause. Bong, bong, bong. Pause. B-O-M-G, bong, bong. Pause. B-O-N-G. Bong, 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 bong. The sequence echoes across the city, and you imagine you can hear the collective groan of firefighters who are already halfway to their engines. You sink into your chair, face burning with embarrassment. This is the 3rd time this month you've panicked over the Morton Street bakery. 3rd time. They installed new ovens last spring, bigger, hotter, more efficient, and the steam output is dramatic. You know this. You've been told this. The bakery owner even sent a letter to the tower explaining the situation. And yet here you are ringing full fire alarms because bread is being baked. Historians still argue whether Firewatch systems suffered more from false alarms or from watchmen who were too hesitant to ring alarms, but you're pretty sure you're single-handedly proving the false alarm camp correct. Pete's going to mock you mercilessly when he finds out. The foreman will probably dock your pay. Again, last month's false alarm cost you 2 days' wages. Here's a quirky detail about 19th century fire response that makes this even worse. Steam fire engines take approximately 15 minutes to build up sufficient boiler pressure after being lit. So the companies you just summoned were in the process of lighting their boilers, heating water, and preparing for a long pumping operation. Now they have to shut everything down, drain the boilers, and stable the horses again. You've wasted roughly 3 man-hours of labor across 4 companies. At municipal wages, you don't want to calculate how much that is. Through the telescope, you can see the first fire wagon appearing on Market Street, horses at full gallop, steam pumper bouncing behind them. The wagon screeches to a halt in front of the hardware store. Firefighters jump down, scanning for smoke, finding none. The captain looks around in confusion, then slowly raises his eyes toward your tower. Even from 100 feet up and 3 blocks away, you can feel his glare. You give a pathetic little wave that he definitely can't see. The captain confers with his crew, gestures at the bakery, and shakes his head. The men begin the process of turning the wagon around. They don't look happy. You make an entry in the logbook, 8046 AM, Alarm District, 19, commercial smoke, 8 and 48 AM recall issued, false alarm, bakery steam. You consider adding watchman is incompetent, but decide that's implied. The bakery steam has almost completely dissipated now. In the clear morning light, it's obvious it was never smoke at all. Steam is whiter, less dense, and it dissipates quickly. Smoke lingers and darkens. You know this. You've been trained on this. You somehow manage to forget it in the moment of panic. You stand and pace the small cab, trying to burn off the adrenaline still flooding your system. Your hands are shaking. Your heart rate is returning to normal. You feel simultaneously humiliated and still convinced you made the right call in the moment. Better a false alarm than a missed fire, right? That's what they tell you in training, though they probably didn't expect you to ring false alarms weekly. The commercial district returns to its normal rhythms below. The fire wagons retreat to their stations, and you're left with 11 hours remaining on your shift, knowing that every firefighter in the district is currently cursing your name. At least it wasn't the crocodile dung incident Pete mentioned. Apparently, in ancient Egypt, people used crocodile dung as sunscreen. Totally irrelevant to your current situation, but thinking about ancient Egyptians smearing themselves with reptile feces makes you feel slightly better about your own poor life choices. You return to the telescope, back to scanning, back to watching, back to trying not to panic at every wisp of steam in this cursed city. After the bakery debacle, you decide the safest course of action is focusing on something that can't possibly go wrong. Paperwork. The logbook sits open on the desk, its pages filled with months of entries in various handwritings. The city requires comprehensive documentation of every shift, ostensibly for insurance purposes, but probably just to give bureaucrats something to review during their leisurely office jobs. You pick up the pencil. The city provides exactly 1 pencil per month, and you're expected to sharpen it yourself and begin the hourly weather observations. Temperature first. The thermometer hangs on the north wall, away from direct sunlight, and currently reads 62 degrees Fahrenheit. You record this in the appropriate column, 9000 AM 62F. Next comes barometric pressure. The barometer is mounted beside the thermometer, a beautiful brass instrument with a circular face like a clock. The needle currently points to 30.1 inches of mercury and rising. You note this down. Rising pressure generally means clear weather, which is good for visibility but makes smoke hang lower in the air. Falling pressure means storms approaching, which brings its own set of problems. Rain makes smoke harder to spot, and lightning strikes can start fires faster than you can ring alarms. Wind direction requires you to actually stand up and peer at the weather vane mounted on the roof above. You stick your head out the east window and crane your neck upward. The iron rooster that serves as your wind indicator is pointing southeast, meaning the wind is coming from the northwest. You record. Wind NW moderate. Moderate is your professional estimate based on how the factory smoke is behaving, angled but not horizontal, steady but not gusting. Historians still argue whether Firewatch Tower's weather records provided any genuine meteorological value or just created busywork for watchmen. But some academic, somewhere, is probably writing a dissertation using your temperature logs. You imagine a future scholar poring over this very logbook. Note the watchman's meticulous recordings during October 1883. That scholar will never know you mostly make up the wind speed estimates. The logbook also requires documentation of every smoke sighting, even the normal ones. This is tedious beyond belief, but the regulations are clear. All visible emissions shall be recorded with time, location, and character. You scan your memory of the past hour and begin writing. 7015 AM. Textile mill. Light grey smoke. Normal operations. 7,000 AM. Ironworks, heavy black smoke, normal operations. 7,045 AM. Kellerman Tannery, white smoke, rendering operations. 8,046 AM. Market Street Bakery, white steam, fouls alarm, recall issued. You underline fouls alarm twice, because the foreman will definitely be reviewing this page and you want to get ahead of his lecture by demonstrating the documentation continues. Every chimney fire gets logged. Every suspicious wisp. Every train locomotive, every steamship. By the end of a typical 12-hour shift, you'll have filled 2 full pages with smoke observations, most of them utterly routine. Future, you will read this log during the next shift to check for patterns. Did the tannery start smoking earlier today than usual? That might indicate increased production. Did the ironworks go quiet? Possible equipment, failure or labour strike. Here's a quirky detail about fire watch record keeping. In some European cities during the 1700s, watchmen were required to note not just smoke, but also suspicious gatherings of people, evidence of plague, and signs of moral decay. Your job is much simpler. You only have to watch for fire. Though if you started recording moral decay, you could probably fill volumes just watching the tavern district on Saturday nights. You flip back through previous pages reading Pete's entries from last night. His handwriting is worse than usual, probably because he was half asleep. 2047 AM cat stuck on brewery roof again. Same cat. That cat has problems. You smile despite yourself. That cat does have problems. It gets stuck on that brewery roof at least twice a week, yowling loud enough that you can hear it from the tower. No one knows how it gets up there. The logbook also contains a section for incidents and observations, which is code for weird stuff that happened. You scan through some recent gems. Oct 3 pigeons built nest in signal flag cabinet. Removed nest. Pigeons returned immediately. Eternal war continues. Oct 8. Man on Elm Street attempting to fly kite in moderate winds. Kite became entangled in telegraph wires. Fire department called to retrieve kite. This is not what fire departments are for. Oct 12 observed 2 gentlemen engaged in fisticuffs outside Hannigan's saloon at 11,030 AM. Fight lasted 6 minutes. Taller gentleman victorious. Irrelevant to fire watch duties, but entertaining. You're supposed to restrict your incident reports to fear-related observations, but the unrelenting boredom of this job encourages creative interpretation of the rules. Besides, the foreman seems to enjoy reading the weird stuff he's never complained about it. You check the wall clock, 9:20. You've burned 20 minutes on paperwork, which means you have 10 hours and 40 minutes remaining. Mathematics is cruel. You make another logbook entry, 9,020 AM. All systems normal. Weather clear. Watchman contemplating life choices. The pencil is getting dull. You retrieve your pocket knife and carefully sharpen the point over the waste bin, creating a small pile of wood shavings and graphite dust. The city's 1 pencil per month policy means you need to make this writing instrument last another 3 weeks. You've developed a whole sharpening ritual that extends pencil life frequent light sharpenings instead of occasional heavy ones, rotating the pencil to wear the point evenly, never using it to poke things or clean your fingernails, no matter how tempting. You blow the graphite dust off the freshly sharpened point and make one final entry, 9,025 AM. Logbook current. Observations continue. There! Official business completed. Now you just have to stay alert, avoid ringing false alarms, and somehow keep your mind from turning to porridge during the endless hours of watching smoke that never turns into fire. You close the logbook and return to the windows. The city continues its industrial symphony below, oblivious to your meticulous record-keeping. Somewhere, a bureaucrat will eventually read your temperature logs and feel satisfied that proper procedures are being followed. That's probably the most excitement that bureaucrat will have all week. At least you have the false alarms to keep things interesting. By 10:30, your stomach is growling loud enough that you're worried the citizens below might hear it and mistake it for some kind of emergency signal. You've been eyeing that cheese in your lunch pail for the past hour, but you made a rule for yourself. No lunch before 11 o'clock. Eating too early means the afternoon stretches into an eternity of hunger-induced misery. Discipline is essential when you're trapped in a wooden box with finite food. Except discipline is also negotiable, and you're really hungry, so you compromise by eating one of your remaining bread slices. You tear off small pieces and chew slowly, trying to make it last. The bread is stale now, having absorbed moisture from being in the lunch pail all morning, which somehow makes it both harder and soggier simultaneously. It's a culinary paradox that your wife would find fascinating and you find depressing. While you eat, you continue scanning crumbs falling onto the windowsill. A mainstream historical fact, 19th century urban workers typically ate their main meal at midday, but fire watchmen had to eat on duty, standing up, with their eyes never leaving the city. You're part of a proud tradition of people eating terrible cold lunches in uncomfortable positions while performing tedious jobs. Your ancestors would be so proud. 11 o'clock finally arrives, and you allow yourself the cheese. It's sharp cheddar, and it's been sitting in the warming tower for 6 hours, which means it's developed an interesting oily sheen. You cut it into small cubes with your pocket knife, the same knife you just used to sharpen your pencil, so there's probably graphite mixed in with the cheese now. Extra minerals, very nutritious. The cheese is good though. Your wife buys it from the German delicatessen on Rhine Street, and it has actual flavour, unlike the sad, waxy blocks some of the other watchmen eat. You savour each cube, alternating bites of cheese with sips of water from your canteen. This is luxury, tower style. You're practically dining at Delmonico's up here. But now comes the part of your day you've been dreading, the latrine situation. Or, more accurately, the bucket situation. Because the city, in its infinite wisdom, designed this fire watchtower without any plumbing whatsoever. No running water, no toilet, no chamber pot concealed in a civilized compartment. Just a wooden bucket with a lid stored in the corner behind a flimsy privacy screen that provides absolutely no actual privacy because you're alone in a tiny octagonal room. You've been holding it since you arrived at 5 this morning. That's 6 hours, which is approaching your personal record but not yet critical. The problem is you have another 6 hours remaining on your shift, and at some point biology will win this argument. The bucket beckons. The bucket always wins. Here's a quirky detail they definitely don't mention during job recruitment. In medieval European watchtowers, guardsmen were expected to simply relieve themselves off the side of the tower. Gravity handled the disposal. Pedestrians below learned to pay attention to warning shouts. Your situation is arguably more civilized, but only marginally. You check the windows to ensure no one is somehow watching, which is paranoid because you're 100 feet in the air and there are no taller buildings nearby, and reluctantly approach the bucket. The privacy screen is a cruel joke. It's a 3-sided wooden partition about 4 feet tall, painted a depressing shade of municipal grey. It blocks absolutely nothing from the view of anyone who might hypothetically enter the tower cab. The bucket itself is a standard galvanized steel pail, the same kind used for everything from carrying coal to washing floors. This one is designated exclusively for waste, which is marked by a painted red X on the side. There's a wooden seat that fits over the rim, creating a primitive commode. Someone, probably Pete, has carved Throne of Contemplation into the seat, which is either philosophical or deeply sarcastic. You do what needs doing quickly and with minimal contemplation, philosophical or otherwise. The indignity is profound. You attended school. You can read and write. You're a trained professional performing an essential municipal service. And yet here you are, using a bucket in the corner of a tower like some kind of medieval serf. The bucket has a tight-fitting lid, which helps, but it doesn't eliminate the problem entirely. During summer shifts, the smell becomes noticeable. You've developed a strategy of sprinkling a handful of sawdust into the bucket after each use, which absorbs moisture and provides minimal odor control. The sawdust is stored in a small bag beside the bucket. This is your life now. Sawdust management. Historians still argue whether the lack of sanitation facilities in early fire watch towers contributed to the high turnover rate among watchmen, but you have your own theory. Yes, definitely yes. The answer is yes. You've seen the employment records. The average fire watchman lasts about 8 months before finding literally any other job. You've been here 2 years, which makes you either dedicated or unemployable. Probably both. You wash your hands in the small basin using water from your jug and a sliver of brown soap. The water you use for washing is water you can't drink later, so you're conservative. A quick rinse, minimal soap, a wipe on the towel hanging from a nail, done. You're as clean as you're going to get for the next 6 hours. The worst part about the bucket system isn't even the bucket itself, it's the disposal. At the end of every shift, you're expected to carry the bucket down 7 flights of narrow stairs and dump it in the waste pit behind the tower. Carrying a sloshing bucket of human waste down 100+ steps on a spiral staircase is exactly as awful as it sounds. You've developed a specific technique involving small steps and absolute focus, but occasionally things still go wrong. You try not to think about it. Some towers in larger cities have multiple watchmen per shift who can rotate breaks and handle their personal needs at ground level. Your tower employs exactly 1 watchman per shift because the city council decided 2 watchmen was unnecessary extravagance. Apparently 1 sleep-deprived man with a bucket is sufficient fire protection for 700,000 citizens. You return to the west window and pick up the telescope, trying to restore some dignity to your profession. You're a trained observer, a vital link in the public safety chain, a skilled technician monitoring for combustion events. You're definitely not just a guy in a box with a bucket, no matter what the bucket situation suggests. The city sprawls below, blissfully unaware of your bathroom logistics. Smoke rises from 100 chimneys. Life continues its normal patterns, and you continue your watch, fed and relieved, ready for the long afternoon ahead. At least you won't have to think about the bucket again for another few hours. Small victories. Around 11:45, you hear footsteps clanging on the iron staircase below. Someone's climbing the tower, which is unusual. Mid-shift visitors are rare because most people have better things to do than climb 7 flights of stairs just to chat. You lean over the trapdoor opening and peer down through the gaps in the steps. It's Pete. Of course it's Pete. The old man is hauling himself up the spiral, wheezing audibly, gripping the rail like his life depends on it. He's supposed to be home sleeping after his overnight shift, but here he is, climbing back up to the tower for reasons that are probably either important or completely idiotic. You forget something, you call down. My goddamn tobacco pouch, Pete gasps between steps. Left it in the cabinet. You roll your eyes. Pete climbed 137 steps for tobacco. That's dedication to nicotine addiction. You'll give him that. You wait at the top while he completes the final ascent, his face beaten by the time he emerges through the trapdoor. He collapses against the wall, breathing like a drowning man. You're going to die on these stairs one day, you observe. Better than dying of boredom up here, Pete wheezes. He shuffles to the cabinet and retrieves his tobacco pouch from where it's wedged behind the signal flags. Ah, there's my sweetheart. He pats the pouch affectionately and immediately begins packing his pipe. You're not smoking that up here, you warn. The hell I'm not. I just climbed Everest for this. He strikes a match and puffs the pipe to life, filling the cab with smoke that smells like burning leather mixed with old socks. You crack open the north window wider, hoping the breeze will clear it before you asphyxiate. Pete settles into the spare chair. Technically, there's only supposed to be 1 chair per shift, but someone donated a second, and the city hasn't bothered to remove it, and props his feet on the desk. His boots are caked with dried mud and something that might be horse manure. Fantastic. So, Pete says, smoke curling from his pipe, heard you rang another false alarm this morning. Word travels fast. The bakery again, you admit? The bakery. Jesus Christ. How many times? Pete shakes his head. The foreman's going to have your hide. That's what, 3 this month? It looked like smoke. It's always steam. It's been steam for 6 months. That bakery's not burning down, it's just making bread very aggressively. Pete taps ash into his palm and deposits it in the waste bin, which you appreciate, even though he's still contaminating your workspace with toxic fumes. You know they're talking about docking everyone's pay again. This gets your attention. What? Why? Budget shortfalls. City Council claims the Firewatch program is overfunded. Pete makes air quotes with his fingers, somehow managing not to drop his pipe. Overfunded. We get $9 a week and we have to bring our own lunch. But apparently, that's extravagant. A mainstream historical fact, municipal workers in the 1880s had almost no labour protections and could have their wages cut or hours extended at bureaucratic whim. Fire watchmen were particularly vulnerable because the job required no formal education and hundreds of unemployed men would happily take your position for $8 a week, or $7, or $6. The race to the bottom had no finish line. How much are they cutting, you ask, dreading the answer. Rumour is 50 cents a week. Starting next month, Pete puffs his pipe philosophically. That'll bring us down to $8.50. Which is less than the factory workers make, and they don't have to sit in boxes staring at smoke all day. 50 cents a week is significant. That's 2 pounds of decent coffee or a week's worth of bread. That's your margin between making rent on time and being late. You feel anger rising in your chest but suppress it because anger doesn't pay bills. Did you hear about Thompson? Pete continues, clearly in a gossiping mood. From Tower 6? What about him? Quit last week. Just didn't show up for his shift. They found his resignation letter pinned to the door. Pete grins. Letter said, and I quote, "I would rather dig ditches in hell than spend another minute in this cursed tower. My regards to the City Council, who can perform anatomically impossible acts upon themselves." You can't help but laugh. He actually wrote that? Hand to God. The foreman was furious. Apparently they're having trouble finding a replacement because word got out about Thompson's letter and now nobody wants the job. Pete seems delighted by this chaos. Tower 6 has been unmanned for 4 days. The whole Northwest District completely unwatched. Historians still argue whether Firewatch towers genuinely reduced fire damage or just created the illusion of safety, but leaving an entire district unmonitored seems reckless even by bureaucratic standards. Then again, if a fire starts in the Northwest District and no watchman sees it, does it make a sound? You're pretty sure the City Council's answer would be, not our problem until the insurance claims arrive. Pete shifts in his chair and picks up your logbook, squinting at your most recent entries. Your penmanship is atrocious, you know that? It's perfectly legible. It looks like a spider had a seizure on the page. Look at this, is that a 3 or an 8? He points to your temperature notation. That's a 6. See, that's a problem right there. 6s should not be mysterious. Pete flips back through previous pages, shaking his head. And your smoke descriptions are too vague. Light grey smoke. Normal operations. What does that mean? How light? How grey? Be specific. There's only so many ways to describe smoke. Wrong. Smoke is an art form. You need poetry, lustrous pearl grey plumes ascending gracefully. You've never written anything like that in your life. Maybe I should start. Maybe that's how we get our 50 cents back, impress the bureaucrats with our literary merit. Pete sets down the logbook and takes a long draw on his pipe. Seriously though, you need to work on your documentation. The foreman actually reads these, and if your handwriting's bad enough, he'll use it as an excuse to deny your wage appeals. This is probably true. The foreman is petty enough that poor penmanship could genuinely affect your employment prospects. You make a mental note to write more carefully, even though your hand cramps after an hour of detailed entries. Anything else I'm doing wrong, you ask, only half sarcastic. Your coal rationing's too conservative. You're going to freeze come January if you keep using 1 bucket per shift. Burn more in the morning, coast on residual heat in the afternoon. Pete gestures at the stove with his pipe stem. Also, you need to oil that blue flag pulley. I could hear it squeaking from 3 blocks away. It's on my list. Your list is too long. Do things immediately, or they never get done. Pete stands groaning as his knees crack. Anyway, I got my tobacco, I've sufficiently criticised your life choices, and I need to sleep before tonight's shift. Try not to ring any more alarms for bakeries, yeah? I'll do my best. Pete descends through the trapdoor, his footsteps clanging down the spiral. You listen until the sounds fade, then turn back to the windows. The tower feels quieter now, emptier. Pete's visit broke up the monotony, even if he did criticise your handwriting and contaminate the air with his terrible tobacco. You check the wall clock, 12:15. 5 more hours until your actual relief arrives. 5 more hours of watching smoke, recording temperatures, and trying not to think about your impending wage cut. At least Pete left his chair. Small comfort, but you'll take it. Around 1 o'clock, just when you're settling into the afternoon rhythm of tedious scanning, you hear more footsteps on the staircase. This time it's not Pete coming back for forgotten item sites, the foreman, Mr. Sushwoods, Gresham, and he's accompanied by someone you don't recognise. A younger man, maybe 22 or 23, with clean hands and an eager expression that screams, "New recruit." Your heart sinks. They're giving you a trainee. Gresham emerges through the trapdoor first, barely winded despite the climb. The man is 60 years old and built like a bulldog, all compact muscle and professional irritation. "Afternoon," he grunts, which passes for warm greeting from him. "This is William Hendricks. He's shadowing today. Show him the ropes." The new recruit follows through the trapdoor, breathing hard but trying to hide it. He's wearing a soutane, actual wool suit with a vest and collar which tells you everything you need to know. He has no idea what this job actually entails. Nobody wears a suit in a fire tower. You'll be lucky if he lasts until dinner. "Pleasure to meet you," Hendricks says, extending his hand. His palm is soft, uncalloused, definitely not a factory worker or labourer, probably a clerk or shop assistant looking for steadier employment. "Poor bastard." You shake his hand and glance at Gresham. "How long?" 2 hours. "I'll collect him at 3. Gresham's already descending back through the trapdoor. Don't let him ring the bell unless there's an actual fire. The emphasis on actual is clearly directed at you and your bakery incident. And then you're alone with William Hendricks, who's looking around the tower cab with the kind of wide-eyed wonder that will disappear in approximately 15 minutes. "So," he says brightly, "where should I start?" You gesture at the windows. "Start by looking. That's 90% of the job. Just looking." "Right. Looking." He peers out the west window at the factory district. "And what am I looking for exactly? Smoke that doesn't belong. Fires. Emergencies." You join him at the window. "See that iron works." You point to the massive brick complex belching black smoke. "That's normal. Heavy bituminous coal, burns dirty, produces thick black emissions. You'll see it every day, all day." Hendricks nods, squinting. "And the lighter smoke from that other building?" "Textile mill. Anthracite coal, cleaner burn, light grey smoke. Also normal." You sweep your hand across the panorama. Your job is to memorize what normal looks like so you can spot abnormal immediately. Here's a mainstream historical fact you've explained to 3 previous trainees. Anthracite coal produces roughly 70% less smoke than bituminous, but costs nearly double, which is why only the wealthier factories use it. The poor neighbourhoods burn soft coal and wood, creating the thick atmospheric haze that hangs over industrial cities like a permanent fog. You point to the church district. "See that church with the tall spire? St. Catherine's." "Yes, that church always looks like it's burning. Every single day. The sun hits the copper roof at a certain angle between 2 and 4 p.m. and it reflects oranged and your brain will scream, 'Fire!' at least once a week." It's not fire. It's never fire. It's just deceptive architecture. Hendricks laughs, then realizes you're serious. "Really? Really?" I rang the alarm for St. Sain. Catherine's my second day on the job. Fire companies arrived to find a perfectly intact church and one very embarrassed watchman. You don't mention that the embarrassed watchman was you. Patetha, overnight watchman, rang it twice. We've all done it. You walk him to the telescope and adjust it to point toward the waterfront. This is your best tool and your worst enemy. The magnification lets you see details from 2 miles away, but it also makes everything look more dramatic than it actually is. A cooking fire seen through this lens looks like an inferno. Hendricks peers through the eyepiece. I can see individual people on the docks. Right. You can also see smoke from individual cigarettes, which you'll mistake for building fires approximately 40 times before you learn to distinguish them. You point to the focus knob. Always refocus between observations. Don't trust yesterday's setting. You spend the next 20 minutes walking him through smoke types. White smoke, steam, usually harmless. Light grey, wood fires, normal for residential cooking. Dark grey, paper or fabric burning. Black, coal, petroleum or rubber. Brown, chemical fires, very bad. Each colour tells a story, and his job is to read those stories faster than the fires can spread. A quirky detail about 19th century smoke observation. Some European towers employed colourblind watchmen specifically for night duty because they could distinguish subtle gradations in brightness that normal vision observers missed in darkness. Your city hasn't adopted this practice, probably because hiring people based on their deficiencies sounds too progressive for the city council. What about wind? Hendricks asks. How does that affect smoke? Wind changes everything. You pull out the weather log and show him your notations. Northwest wind pushes smoke southeast. Strong winds flatten smoke plumes, making them harder to spot. Weak winds let smoke rise vertically, which is easier to see but spreads slower. You point at the weather vane above. Check it every hour and record it. Wind direction determines how fires spread and where companies should position their equipment. This is more complicated than I thought, Hendricks admits. It gets worse. Humidity affects smoke density. Temperature inversions trap smoke low. Rain can hide fires completely until they're out of control. You're not trying to discourage him exactly, but he needs to understand the reality. Historians still argue whether fire watchtowers prevent more fires than they miss. But the truth is, we're doing our best with imperfect information and imperfect tools. You show him the bell rope and walk him through the code system, watching his eyes glaze over as you explain the timing requirements. You'll never remember all this today, you assure him. It takes months. Just understand that precision matters. Wrong timing sends companies to wrong locations. Hendricks practices counting the rhythm without actually pulling the rope. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 PULL. 1, 2, 0, 3, 4, 5 PULL. His timing is off by at least a second, but it's his first try. Better, you lie. Keep practicing. Mental rehearsal prevents panic during real emergencies. You walk him through the logbook requirements, the equipment maintenance schedule, the flag signals. His initial enthusiasm is visibly draining, replaced by dawning comprehension that this job is mostly tedium punctuated by moments of pure terror. The suit jacket comes off around 2:15. The collar gets loosened at 2:30. At 2:45, Gresham returns to collect him. Hendricks looks exhausted, and he's only been here 90 minutes. Learn anything? Gresham asks. Yes, sir, Hendricks says, though his tone suggests what he's learned is that he doesn't want this job. They descend together, leaving you alone again. You return to the windows and resume your scanning, wondering if Hendricks will actually accept the position or if he'll find anything else to do with his life. You give him 3 weeks, maximum. The suit was a bad sign. After Hendricks leaves, you notice the weather changing. It's subtle at first, a slight haze developing on the eastern horizon, a shift in the light quality that makes distant buildings look softer around the edges. You check the barometer, still 30.1 inches, holding steady. But something's different. The air feels heavier, damper. Your nose detects moisture that wasn't there an hour ago. This is the part of the job that took you months to learn and years to master, reading weather patterns and understanding how they transform smoke behavior. The Fire Watch manual provides basic guidance. Observe meteorological conditions and adjust surveillance accordingly, but the real education comes from spending hundreds of hours watching smoke interact with atmospheric conditions you can feel but can't always measure. Humidity is rising. You can tell without consulting instruments because the factory smoke that was crisp and defined this morning is now blurred and fuzzy. The ironworks emissions, usually sharp black columns, have taken on a softer quality, spreading wider as they rise. Moisture in the air makes smoke particles clump together, creating larger, slower-moving plumes that hang suspended instead of dispersing quickly. This is both good and bad for fire watching. Good because smoke becomes more visible, darker and denser against the sky. Bad because everything produces more dramatic-looking smoke, which means distinguishing normal from abnormal becomes harder. That textile mill that usually emits barely visible grey wisps, in high humidity it looks like it's pumping out serious emissions. You've learned not to panic, but it requires conscious effort. You move to the north window and scan the residential district. Chimney smoke from cooking fires is behaving strangely, sinking instead of rising. That's a temperature inversion, a layer of warm air sitting on top of cooler air near the ground, trapping smoke low. In severe inversions, the entire city can disappear under a blanket of its own emissions. London's famous for this phenomenon. They call it pea soup fog, though historians still argue whether that term refers to the fog's colour or its thickness. Temperature inversions are your nemesis. They turn routine smoke into ominous clouds, obscure actual fires behind curtains of trapped emissions, and make it nearly impossible to judge distances accurately. That warehouse fire that looks close might be 2 miles away. That house fire that seems distant could be 3 blocks over. The atmospheric distortion plays tricks on your eyes. You jot a note in the logbook. 2005 p.m. Humidity increasing, possible inversion forming, visibility degrading. The foreman likes detailed weather observations because they provide context if you miss a fire. Couldn't see through the inversion is a better excuse than I was daydreaming about lunch. A quirky meteorological fact that's relevant to your profession: in ancient Rome, city watchmen called vigiles were trained to predict fires by observing cloud formations and wind patterns. They believed certain cloud shapes presaged conflagrations, which was probably nonsense, but gave them something to do besides just staring at buildings. You sometimes wish you had mystical cloud reading powers. Would make the job more interesting. The wind shifts, swinging from northwest to north-northeast. You watch the factory smokestacks carefully as their plumes bend in the new direction, adjusting your mental map of which neighborhoods are downwind from industrial emissions. Southeast districts will get today's soot and ash. Northwest districts will breathe cleaner air. This matters during ferrosmoke, and sparks travel downwind, potentially igniting buildings hundreds of yards from the source. You pull out your personal notebook, not the official logbook, but a small journal where you record patterns and observations that wouldn't mean anything to anyone else. Over 2 years, you've developed an informal weather prediction system based on smoke behavior. When the tannery smoke flattens before noon, rain usually follows within 6 hours. When ship smoke from the harbour rises straight vertical, storms are at least 24 hours away. When factory emissions start swirling in chaotic patterns, strong winds are coming. None of this is scientific. You've never studied meteorology, but you've watched smoke for thousands of hours, and patterns emerge from that kind of obsessive observation. Pete has his own system. He claims he can predict snow by watching pigeon flight patterns and the angle of morning frost on the tower railings. You're not convinced his method works, but he's usually right, which is annoying. The haze thickens. The eastern horizon, crisp and clear this morning, now fades into grey obscurity. Buildings beyond a mile start losing definition. This is the gradual onset of fog, which will either dissipate by sunset or settle in for the night. If it settles, the overnight watchman will have a miserable shift, straining to see through soup while trying to distinguish fire glow from gas lamps. You adjust your scanning pattern to account for reduced visibility, focusing on closer districts where you can still see clearly. The waterfront warehouses, normally your primary concern, are starting to blur. You can make out the general shapes, but not details. The telescope helps, cutting through some of the haze, but even magnification has limits when atmospheric moisture is scattering light in every direction. A mainstream historical fact, London's Great Smog of 1952 killed thousands of people because smoke and fog combined to create toxic conditions that paralyzed the city. That's 70 years in your future, but similar events happen regularly in industrial cities. The combination of coal smoke and natural fog creates what scientists will eventually call smog, though that term doesn't exist yet. You just call it bad breathing days and try not to think about what's accumulating in your lungs. You make another weather notation, 3:15 p.m., fog developing, visibility reduced to approximately 1 mile, continuing to degrade. The handwriting is neater. This time Pete's criticism about your penmanship stung a bit. The afternoon light takes on a peculiar quality, diffused and shadowless. The city below looks painted, two-dimensional, like a stage set rather than a real place. Sounds change, too dampened, muffled, arriving at odd angles. A train whistle that should be sharp and clear instead sounds distant and melancholic. You've learned to read these shifts, to understand how weather transforms your entire working environment. Clear days are straightforward, see smoke, identify source, respond accordingly. But weather complicates everything, adding layers of interpretation between observation and action. The city breathes its industrial breath into increasingly humid air, and you watch those transformed emissions, reading stories written in smoke and moisture. By 3:30 the fog has settled into a steady presence and you've entered what Pete calls the dead zone, the middle hours of the afternoon shift when boredom reaches levels that make you question your sanity. You've scanned every visible rooftop at least 40 times. You've recorded every temperature change and wind shift. You've inspected equipment that doesn't need inspecting. And you still have 3.5 hours remaining. This is when the mind games begin. You start by counting pigeons. There are currently 17 visible birds perched on the roofline of the hardware store on Market Streeties, the same building you falsely alarmed about this morning. The pigeons don't care about your professional embarrassment. They're just sitting there doing pigeon things, occasionally repositioning themselves for no apparent reason. You watch one bird shuffle 3 feet to the left, pause, then shuffle back. Riveting content. The counting expands. 23 chimney pots on the residential block to the northwest. 30 windows visible on the front facade of the courthouse. 8 horse-drawn wagons currently stopped at the intersection of Main and 5th. One particularly ambitious spider building a web in the corner of your east window. You consider naming the spider but decide that's a sign you're losing your grip on reality. A mainstream historical fact. Monotony and sensory deprivation can cause hallucinations after extended periods. Lighthouse keepers, solitary miners, and fire watchmen all report seeing things that aren't there after hours of unchanging environments. You're not hallucinating yet, but you understand how it happens. Your brain, desperate for stimulation, starts inventing content to fill the void. You move on to memorizing building facades. The bank on 3rd Street has Corinthian column jus, count 6 across the front. The Opera House has decorative cornices with what look like carved faces, though they're too distant to identify clearly even with the telescope. The train depot has a clock tower with 4 faces, each showing slightly different times because the city can't be bothered to synchronize them properly. Eastern face says 3034. Southern face says 3037. The concept of accurate municipal timekeeping is apparently too ambitious. Here's a quirky detail about architectural observation. Some fire-watch towers in European cities required watchmen to sketch building layouts from memory as part of their training. The theory was that detailed architectural knowledge helped predict fire spread patterns. Your city doesn't require sketching, but you've mentally mapped every major structure in your coverage area anyway. When you close your eyes, you can visualize the entire downtown district, which buildings are stone, which are timber frame, which have slate roofs versus wooden shingles. It's useless information until it suddenly becomes crucial during an emergency. The pedestrians below have become your entertainment. You pick one. At random, a woman in a blue dress crossing Market Street and invent her entire life story. She's Mrs. Catherine Morrison, age 37, married to a butcher, mother of 4 children. She's walking to the apothecary to purchase laudanum for her headaches, which are caused by her husband's snoring and her mother-in-law's constant criticism. After the apothecary, she'll stop at the milliner to admire hats she can't afford, then return home to cook dinner while quietly contemplating whether life was supposed to feel this exhausting. You have no idea if any of that is true. She's just a blue dot moving across your field of vision, but the narrative keeps your mind occupied for 90 seconds, which is better than nothing. Another pedestrian, a man in a brown coat carrying a briefcase. He's Mr. Harold Jennings, insurance adjuster, age 49, recently promoted to senior assessor. He's walking to the railway station to catch the 4005 to Wilmington, where he'll investigate a warehouse claim. He suspects fraud. The fire damage patterns don't match the owner's account. He'll spend 3 days gathering evidence, return home Friday evening, and spend the weekend arguing with his wife about her sister's upcoming visit. You're getting better at this game. The details come faster, more elaborate. That boy running down Pine Street, escaped from his factory job for an unauthorized break, will be docked an hour's wages. Doesn't care because the sunshine is worth it. That elderly couple walking arm in arm, married 52 years, still in love, heading to their granddaughter's house for Sunday dinner, even though it's Thursday. Your grasp on actual time may be slipping. Historians still argue whether extreme boredom among watchmen led to missed fires or actually enhanced vigilance through desperation for any change in routine. But you're firmly in. The boredom is dangerous. Camp. Your mind is wandering. You catch yourself staring at that spider for a full 2 minutes without scanning for smoke. That's how fires get missed, not through incompetence, but through brain-numbing tedium that makes focusing impossible. You force yourself back to the telescope. Methodical sweep. West to east, north to south. The fog has thickened further, reducing visibility to maybe half a mile now. The waterfront district has disappeared completely into grey murk. You're effectively watching a reduced territory, which should make the job easier, but somehow makes it more tedious. Less to see means less variation, means more boredom. The wall clock reads 3:52. Time has slowed to a crawl. You're convinced someone has tampered with the mechanism, stretching seconds into minutes. You tap the clock face, hoping it's just stuck. It's not stuck. It's just slow. Or time is actually moving this slowly. Both possibilities seem equally plausible. You count the coal chunks remaining in your bucket. 11 pieces. You've rationed well, which means you'll have heat through the end of your shift. Small victory. You arrange the chunks by size, creating a little coal pyramid on the floor beside the stove. Then you feel ridiculous and put them back in the bucket. The boredom is physical now, a weight pressing on your chest. Your legs ache from standing. Your eyes burn from scanning. Your mind feels like it's filled with cotton. You'd give anything for something to happen, not a fire, obviously, but something. A marching band, a runaway horse, a spontaneous juggling demonstration. Anything to break the monotony. A pigeon lands on the north windowsill. You count it. Pigeon number 18. It stares at you. You stare back. Neither of you blinks. This is your life now. Staring contests with pigeons while the city continues its oblivious routine below. The staring contest with pigeon number 18 ends when the bird finally loses interest and flies away. You check the clock again, 4027 p.m. The sun is beginning its descent, and the quality of light in the tower cab shifts from harsh afternoon glare to softer amber tones. This is actually your favourite part of the shift, the transition from day to evening, when the city transforms from an industrial workhorse into something almost magical. The fog has lifted slightly, which is either actual meteorological improvement or just your desperate wishful thinking. Either way, visibility extends back to maybe 3/4 of a mile. You can see the waterfront district again, the warehouses emerging from the grey like ships appearing through mist. The temperature has dropped. The thermometer now reads 56 degrees, and you add another small chunk of coal to the stove. Around 4:45, you spot the first lamplighter beginning his rounds. He's a tiny figure moving methodically along Market Street, carrying his long pole with the igniter mechanism on the end. You've watched this sane man. You're pretty sure his name is O'Malley, though you've never actually spoken to him perform this ritual every evening for 2 years. He walks from lamp to lamp with practiced efficiency, raising the pole, triggering the gas flow, igniting the flame, moving on. Each lamp blooms to life behind him like flowers opening in fast forward. A mainstream historical fact, municipal gas lighting revolutionized urban life in the mid-19th century, extending productive hours after sunset and dramatically reducing crime rates. Before gas lamps, cities went dark at nightfall except for the occasional oil lamp or torch. The installation of comprehensive gas lighting systems represented one of the century's most significant infrastructure investments. Your city installed its system in 1871, and maintaining it requires a small army of lamplighters working in shifts. You track O'Malley through the telescope, watching his precise movements. There's something meditative about his work, the same route every night, the same mechanical actions, the same reliable result. In some ways, his job is even more monotonous than yours. At least you have the illusion of vigilance, the possibility that something might happen. He just lights lamps, over and over, lamp after lamp after lamp. But here's the thing, you're envious. O'Malley gets to move. He walks miles every shift, covering his designated district, muscles working, blood flowing. You're trapped in a wooden box, static, slowly fossilizing. Some days you'd trade jobs in a heartbeat, monotony for monotony, but at least with the benefit of perambulation. The city begins its transformation. As the natural light fades, the gas lamps create pools of warm yellow wenge illumination that seem to glow from within. Individual lamps aren't particularly impressive, but collectively they're stunning. You watch as the lamplighters there are at least 6 working different districts simultaneously gradually transform the darkening cityscape into a constellation of artificial stars. More lamplighters appear, each with their assigned territory. You can distinguish them by their routes and timing. The man working the warehouse district moves faster, covering more ground with less precision. The woman is, there's one female lamplighter, which is unusual enough that you've specifically noted it working the residential blocks moves methodically, sometimes stopping to adjust lamp mechanisms that aren't functioning properly. The teenager working the theatre district seems to be racing an invisible competitor, sprinting between lamps with reckless efficiency. A quirky historical detail. In some European cities, lamplighters were required to also serve as informal night watchmen, reporting suspicious activity and shouting the hour. They were essentially mobile versions of your job, which sounds significantly more interesting than being stationary. Your city doesn't require lamplighters to perform watch duties, but you've noticed they have good relationships with police constables, often stopping to chat and share information. They're part of the informal network that keeps cities functioning after dark. The sky cycles through its evening color palette, pale blue to peach to pink to lavender to deep purple. Against this changing backdrop, the gas lamps multiply like fireflies. You can track the progress of lamplighters by following the growing web of light spreading across the city. By 5:15, the commercial district is fully illuminated. By 5:30, the residential neighborhoods glow warmly. By 5:45, even the distant industrial zones have their scattered lamps burning. The fog, which seemed oppressive during the afternoon, now becomes atmospheric. It diffuses the lamplight, creating soft halos around each flame. The effect is dreamlike, almost theatrical. Streets that looked grim and utilitarian in harsh daylight become mysterious, romantic, full of shadows and golden highlights. You understand why people write poetry about cities at night. There's genuine beauty here, even if it's created by municipal infrastructure and commercial necessity. Your job shifts with the dying light. Daytime fire watching relies on spotting smoke plumes against sky. Nighttime watching focuses on flame glow and unusual light sources. A fire at night manifests as orange illumination where there should only be darkness or brightness that flickers and dances instead of holding steady like gas lamps. It's a completely different observational skill set, and honestly, it's easier in some ways. Fires are more obvious against darkness, but fires at night are also more dangerous. People are sleeping, response times are slower, and visibility is reduced. A fire that starts at 2 a.m. can engulf entire blocks before anyone notices. That's why you have overnight watchmen like Pete, and why the night shift pays an extra $1 per week. Nobody wants that job. Pete only does it because he's insomniac anyway and figures he might as well get paid for being awake. Historians still argue whether nighttime fire watch was more effective than daytime observation, or whether the entire tower system was just expensive theatre to placate insurance companies, but you definitely spotted more fires at night than during the day. The contrast is just clearer. Smoke against sky during daylight is subtle. Flames against darkness are unmistakable. You light your own Lampus Simple oil lantern that provides enough illumination to read the logbook without straining your eyes. The tower cab takes on a cozy quality, warm yellow light mixing with the blue dusk visible through the windows. For a brief moment, this doesn't feel like a job. It feels almost pleasant, almost peaceful. Then you remember you still have 90 minutes left in your shift and the peaceful feeling evaporates. But the lights are pretty at least. That's something. By 6 o'clock, full darkness has settled over the city and your job fundamentally changes. The telescope becomes less useful. Magnifying darkness just gives you bigger darkness, so you rely more on naked eye observation, scanning for anomalies in the pattern of lights below. Your eyes have adjusted to the dimness, pupils dilated, and you've positioned yourself at the west window where the view encompasses the densest concentration of buildings. The first challenge of night watch is distinguishing normal light sources from abnormal ones. Gas lamps burn with steady yellow flames. Windows glow with interior. Lamplights usually warm orange from oil lamps or candles. Factory furnaces produce red orange glows that pulse slightly as workers feed them fuel. All of this is normal. All of this you need to catalogue and mentally filter out so you can spot the irregular, the sudden bright flare that indicates ignition, the flickering orange light that suggests uncontrolled burning, the red glow appearing where no light should exist. You scan methodically, sector by sector, looking for changes. A window that was dark 5 minutes ago is now illuminated, probably just someone coming home and lighting lamps. A glow from an alley that wasn't there before. You watch it carefully and it resolves into a group of workers warming themselves around a barrel fire. Legal? Probably not. Dangerous? Absolutely. Worth ringing an alarm? Debatable. You make a note of the location and keep watching. Here's the thing about nighttime fire observation that nobody tells you during training. Most of what you see is people being idiots with open flames. Barrel fires, unauthorized burning of trash in back lots, drunks smoking cigars near hay storage, teenage boys conducting amateur pyrotechnic experiments in vacant lots. Your job isn't just watching for accidental fires, it's watching for stupidity that might become fires, and there's an endless supply of stupidity. A quirky historical detail about urban fire management: in ancient Rome, the vigiles, the firefighting force, had authority to execute citizens caught with open flames in dangerous locations. Your powers are significantly more limited. You can ring the alarm bell and hope the fire brigade arrives before the idiots burn down the block, but you can't actually stop anyone from doing anything. It's frustrating in a very specific way. Chimney smoke becomes nearly invisible at night, which is both helpful And problematic. Helpful because you're not constantly second-guessing whether normal cooking smoke is actually a fire. Problematic because actual chimney fires, when creosote build up, ignite inside the fluidant, show obvious external signs until they're well advanced. You're looking for sparks shooting from chimney tops, or unusual bright glows at roof lines, or the telltale red reflection on nearby walls that indicates flames inside a structure. Sound becomes crucial after dark. During daylight, the city's ambient noise wagons, workers, machinery creates a constant background roar. At night, things quiet down enough that you can hear distant sounds with surprising clarity. A fire bell ringing from another district. The shouts of people discovering flames, breaking glass, the distinctive crackling roar of major conflagrations. You've learned to distinguish between normal nighttime soundstrunks, singing, dogs barking, late-night deliveries, and emergency sounds that require immediate response. A mainstream historical fact. Before electric fire alarm systems, many cities employed networks of fire bells mounted on towers throughout the urban area. When one tower spotted a fire, they'd ring their bell in a specific pattern, and neighboring towers would relay the signal. It created a cascading alarm system that could alert an entire city within minutes. Your tower participates in this network. If you hear the Tower 6 bell ringing an alarm code, you're supposed to relay it to Tower 8, amplifying the signal outward. It's like a very slow, very loud telegraph system made of bronze. You lean against the window frame, eyes scanning the western districts. A burst of bright light catches your attention. Your heart jumps before your brain identifies it as fireworks. Someone's celebrating something, shooting off rockets near the rail yard. Illegal within city limits, but not your problem unless they set something on fire, which they very well might because fireworks and common sense rarely coexist. You watch the sparkling trails arc across the night sky, briefly beautiful, then dark again. The temperature continues dropping. The thermometer reads 52 degrees now, and you're grateful for the coal stove's warmth. Winter shifts will be brutal. You've heard stories from Pete about January nights when the inside of the tower cab actually frosted over despite the stove burning constantly. Your breath will fog. The windows will ice up on the inside, obscuring your view. You'll spend 12 hours slowly freezing while trying to peer through frost patterns at a dark city. You try not to think about it. More sounds drift up from below. Oh! A train whistle, long and mournful. A woman laughing, the sound carrying clearly through still air. Horses clopping on cobblestones are probably a private carriage, given the late hour. The distant clang of someone working metal in a late-night forge. The city's nocturnal symphony, quieter than daytime but no less complex. You make hourly rounds of all 8 windows, checking each direction systematically. North, residential district quiet, normal scattering of window lights. East, warehouse district mostly dark except for a few buildings running night shifts. South, commercial area largely shut down, just the taverns and late-night establishments showing activity. West, factory district still operating, furnace glows pulsing rhythmically. Everything appears normal. Everything appears safe. Historians still argue whether nighttime firewatch actually prevented fires or just provided false security, but the statistics from cities that eliminated their tower systems are pretty compelling. Fire damage increased significantly. Turns out having someone actually watching the city overnight makes a difference. Who knew? Well, everyone except the city councils that cut funding, apparently. Around 6:30, you spotted genuine concern, a red glow in the window of a tenement building on Elm Street. You grab the telescope and focus on it, heart rate accelerating. The glow is steady, not flickering. It's too bright for a normal lamp, too red for gaslight. You watch for 30 seconds, 45 seconds. The glow remains constant. Then a silhouette passes in front of each person moving around inside the room. The glow is just an unusually bright interior lamp, probably someone using multiple candles or a particularly intense oil lamp. False alarm, but you made the right call checking it. Better to investigate every anomaly than to assume everything's fine and miss the one that matters. You breathe out slowly, feeling the familiar post-adrenaline shakiness. 2 hours and 15 minutes until your relief arrives. 2 hours of darkness, watching lights, listening to sounds, trying to distinguish normal from emergency in a city that never quite sleeps. Your eyes burn, your feet ache, your back hurts from standing, but the city depends on you being awake, being alert, being ready. So you watch, and watch, and watch, and watch. By 7 o'clock the cold has become aggressive. What started as a pleasant autumn chill has transformed into genuine discomfort. The coal stove still radiates heat, but it's a losing battle against the nighttime temperature drop. The wooden walls of the tower cab provide almost no insulation. You might as well be standing in a slightly enclosed gazebo. Every gust of wind finds the gaps between boards, sending cold drafts across your neck and down your back. You retrieve your coat from the peg and pull it on, buttoning it to the collar. It's a heavy wool garment, second-hand from a church charity sale, with worn elbows and a torn pocket you've never bothered to repair. Oh, not fashionable, but functional. The weight of it feels good, comforting. You turn up the collar and immediately feel slightly more human. But your feet are the real problem. You've been standing or occasionally sitting on that hard wooden chair for 14 hours now. 14 hours of bearing weight on the same tired joints and muscles. Your feet have progressed through several stages of discomfort, initial fatigue, sharp pain, numbness, and now a deep ache that radiates up through your ankles and into your calves. You shift your weight from foot to foot, a rhythmic dance you've perfected over 2 years. Left foot, right foot, left foot, right foot. It helps? Barely. You start doing what Pete calls the watchman shuffle, walking in small circles around the tower cab's perimeter, 8 steps to complete the circuit. It's not real exercise, but it gets blood flowing and prevents your legs from completely seizing up. Circle after circle you pace, pausing at each window to scan for fires, then continuing your loop. The floorboards creak under your boots in a familiar rhythm. A mainstream historical fact, prolonged standing is demonstrably harmful to human health, causing varicose veins, joint damage, and circulatory problems. Victorian factory workers, shop clerks, Andius fire watchmen all suffered from standing disease, a catch-all term for the various ailments caused by spending 12-hour shifts on your feet. You're probably developing varicose veins right now. Something to look forward to in old age, assuming your knees don't give out first. The mental fatigue is worse than the physical discomfort. You've been alerted trying to be alert for over 12 hours. Your brain is exhausted from the constant scanning, the perpetual low-level anxiety, the need to distinguish normal from abnormal in an environment where 99% of what you see is utterly routine. It's like being a lifeguard at a pool where nobody ever drowns, but you still have to watch every swimmer every moment because the one time you don't will be the one time it matters. Your eyes feel gritty, like someone sprinkled sand under the lids. You blink hard, rub them with your knuckles, splash a little water on your face from the basin. The cold water helps temporarily, shocking your system back toward alertness. But the effect fades quickly, and you're left fighting the same creeping drowsiness that's been building since mid-afternoon. The darkness is hypnotic. The scattered pattern of gas lamps creates a mesmerizing field of lights that your eyes want to simply drift across without actually focusing on anything specific. It's like staring at stars, beautiful, soothing, and completely counterproductive to staying vigilant. You've caught yourself zoning out 3 times in the past 20 minutes, your gaze unfocused, your mind wandering to thoughts of home, dinner, sleep. Here's a quirky detail about human attention spans that's relevant to your current struggle. Psychological research, which won't be formalized for another few decades, will eventually prove that humans can't maintain true vigilance for more than about 90 minutes without breaks. You're expected to maintain vigilance for 12 hours straight. The math doesn't work. Nobody can actually do this job the way it's designed. You do your best, but Your best involves periodic lapses, moments of inattention, brief intervals where a fire could start and you wouldn't notice until it was already visible to people on the ground. You stamp your feet hard, trying to generate warmth through friction and impact. The sound echoes in the small cab THU thud thud, thud like a very slow, very tired drum solo. Your toes are numb inside your boots. You consider taking off your boots and rubbing your feet, but that seems like admitting defeat. Also, the thought of exposing bare skin to this cold is deeply unappealing. The wind picks up, rattling the windows in their frames. The weather vane above spins with a metallic squeak that needs oil, but probably won't get it until something actually breaks. Wind makes everything harder. It makes the tower sway, slightly, not dangerously, just enough to be unsettling. It makes the gas lamps below flicker and dance, creating false patterns that your exhausted brain interprets as movement or change. It carries sounds in distorted ways, so a distant shout seems close and a nearby conversation seems far away. You add more coal to the stove, watching the fresh chunks catch and glow. The heat feels good on your face when you stand close, almost too hot, a sharp contrast to the cold air just a few feet away. You hold your hands over the stove, palms down, letting warmth penetrate through your gloves. Historians still argue whether fire watchmen suffered more from cold exposure or from the tedium, but you can confirm it's the combination that really breaks you down. The city below is settling into its deepest quiet. Most legitimate businesses are closed. Most families are home for dinner. The streets are less populated, just the nighttime workers and the people whose business thrives after Darkthaven patrons, theatre-goers and various individuals engaged in activities they'd prefer not to conduct in daylight. You can track the tavern district by soundbursts of laughter, occasional arguments, the distinctive crash of breaking glass. Your mind drifts again. You catch it and force yourself to focus. Scan west, scan north, scan east, scan south. Look for orange glows, flickering lights, unusual patterns. See nothing abnormal? Repeat. This is the job. This is all the job will ever be. You check the clock, 7:23 p.m., 1 hour and 37 minutes until your relief arrives. You can survive 97 minutes. You've survived worse. That one time during August when the temperature in the cab reached 108 degrees and you thought you might actually die of heat stroke. You survived that. This is just cold and tired. Cold and tired you can handle. You stamp your feet again. Pull your coat tighter. Blink hard against the grittiness in your eyes. And continue watching the darkness, looking for fires that probably won't come, staying alert through sheer stubborn determination and the knowledge that people are counting on you even though they don't know your name. At 7:41 p.m., your world explodes into focused crisis. You're in the middle of your shuffling circuit, just passing the south window, when you see it, a bright orange glow erupting from the warehouse district near the waterfront. Not the steady red of a furnace, not the yellow warmth of gas lamps. This is brilliant, aggressive orange, the unmistakable colour of uncontrolled combustion. Your heart slams into overdrive. Every fibre of your being snaps to full alertness, exhaustion vaporizing in a surge of adrenaline. You lunge for the telescope, hands shaking as you aim it toward the glow. Through the lens the scene resolves with terrible clarity. Flames are pouring from the second-story windows of the Patterson Timber Warehouse, brilliant orange tongues licking up the brick exterior, black smoke billowing into the night sky. This is real. This is happening. This is what you've been watching for during thousands of hours of tedium, and now that it's here, your training and your panic are fighting for control of your body. You drop the telescope and stumble sprint in your exhausted state-o the desk. Your hands fumble for the laminated code card even though you don't need it. District 23. Patterson Warehouse is in District 23. The code is 2 strikes, pause, 3 strikes. Multiple rounds. Severity code 5 rapid strikes for Waterfront Warehouse. You've practiced this sequence 100 times. You can do this. You grab the bell rope with both hands. Your palms are slick with sudden sweat despite the cold. The rope feels rough and solid, the only real thing in a moment that feels surreal. You take one breath, a deliberate, steadying breath hand pull. Bong! The bell's resonance shakes through your entire skeleton. You count in your head, forcing yourself to maintain the rhythm despite your racing pulse. 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3 Mississippi, 4 Mississippi, 5 Mississippi, bong, 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 bong. 3 strikes. District 23 completed. Tinskin pause. You glance back at the warehouse. The glow is intensifying, spreading. The fire is growing fast. Timber warehouse. Jesus Christ, it's a timber warehouse. The building is essentially stacked kindling. This could spread to the entire waterfront in minutes. Second round. Focus. Execute the code. Bong, 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 bong. 2-3 again. Your arms burn from the effort. Each pull requires your full body weight, yanking downward hard enough that your feet briefly leave the floor. Now the severity code. 5 rapid strikes. You pull in quick succession, grunting with effort. Bong, 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 bong. The echoes roll across the city, and somewhere below, fire companies are already reacting. Alarm bells are ringing in firehouses. Men are running to their equipment. Horses are being harnessed. You've done your job. You've sounded the alarm with the correct code, the right timing, the proper sequence. Now the professionals take over. But you're not done. You rush back to the telescope, refocusing on the warehouse. The fire has spread dramatically in the 30 seconds since you first spotted it. Flames are now visible on the 3rd floor, and sparks are shooting upward into the night sky like malevolent fireworks. The wind, that damned wind you noted earlier, is blowing southeast, which means embers are raining down on the buildings downwind. The rope warehouse, the cotton storage facility, the whole district could go up. A mainstream historical fact. Timber warehouses were the nightmare scenario for 19th century fire brigades. Dry, seasoned wood stacked floor to ceiling, often treated with oils and resins. Once ignited, they burned with terrifying speed and intensity. The Great Chicago Fire of 1871 spread partly because lumber yards and wood storage facilities created chains of conflagration that jumped entire city blocks. Patterson Warehouse holds thousands of board feet of pine, oak, and cedar. It's a bomb, and it's detonating right now. You watch through the telescope as the first fire wagon arrives, horses at full gallop, steam pumper rattling behind them. The response time is incredible, less than 3 minutes from alarm to arrival. The firefighters swarm off the wagon with practiced efficiency, already unrolling hoses, setting up the pumper, running toward the nearest water source. A second wagon appears from the opposite direction, then a third. The fire continues its grotesque expansion. 4th-story windows blow out from heat pressure, showering glass onto the street below. You can see tiny figures, firefighters scrambling to position their equipment, shouting orders you can't hear but can imagine. The steam pumper begins operating, its distinctive rhythmic chugging audible even from your tower. Water arcs through the air, visible in the firelight, landing on flames that seem almost contemptuous of the assault. Orchestrated narrative tension through vivid emergency scene details. This is going well. I need to continue showing the watchman's observation of the fire response, his continued duties during the emergency, and the emotional weight of watching a real fire unfold. Let me continue with the detail and maintain the tension. You grab the logbook and make an entry, your handwriting jerky from adrenaline. 7:401 p.m. Major Fire District 23, Patterson Timber Warehouse. Alarm sounded, multiple companies responding. Your hand is shaking so badly the letters barely form coherent words. But that doesn't matter. What matters is the documentation, the record that you saw it, reported it, did your job. But your job isn't finished. You need to keep watching, need to assess whether the fire is spreading, whether additional alarms are necessary. You return to the windows, splitting your attention between the warehouse and the surrounding buildings. The wind is your enemy now. You watch sparks and embers riding the air currents, landing on neighboring roofs. One ember lands on the rope warehouse and smolders. You hold your breath. A firefighter spots it and directs a hose stream at it, extinguishing it before it can catch. Crisis averted, for now. Here's a quirky detail about Firewatch protocol that becomes crucial during actual emergencies. You're supposed to continue monitoring the situation and ring additional alarms if the fire spreads beyond the original location. If flames jump to adjacent buildings, you ring the adjacent district codes. If the situation escalates to extreme danger, you ring the evacuation. Code 6 strikes, repeated continuously. You keep your hand near the bell rope, ready to pull again if necessary. More wagons arrive. You count 7 fire companies now, which represents nearly every available unit in the central district. They're taking this seriously. They understand what you understood immediately. A timber warehouse fire on a windy night near dense commercial construction is a potential citywide catastrophe. The flames are beautiful and terrible. From your elevated position, you can see the fire's architecture, how it flows and pulses, how it finds new fuel and explodes upward, how it generates its own wind patterns that feed fresh oxygen into the combustion. It's mesmerizing in the worst possible way. You understand why people gather to watch fires. There's something primally compelling about witnessing destruction on this scale, but you force yourself to look away from the fire itself and scan the surrounding area. That's your job, now watching for secondary ignitions, for the sparks that land where firefighters can't see them, for the subtle beginnings of new fires that could go unnoticed while everyone focuses on the main conflagration. Your eyes sweep across rooftops, across alleys, across the docks where wooden ships are moored dangerously close to the growing inferno. The smoke plume is massive now, a black column that you can see even against the dark sky, visible because it's blocking out stars. The column rises hundreds of feet, maybe 1,000, bending in the wind, spreading like a dark stain across the night. Tomorrow morning, the entire eastern district will be covered in soot and ash. Windows will need washing. Streets will need sweeping. And somewhere, an insurance adjuster will begin the grim work of calculating losses. You check the clock, 7:588 p.m. 17 minutes since you first spotted the flames. It feels like 17 hours. Your hands have stopped shaking, but your heart rate is still elevated, pulse pounding in your ears. You've done what you trained to do. You spotted the fire, rang the correct alarm, and the response is underway. Now you just watch and pray the firefighters can contain it before the whole waterfront goes up. The city below is fully alert now. You can see crowds gathering at safe distances, dark figures silhouetted against the firelight, the curiosity seekers, the concerned neighbours, the people who can't help but stare at disaster. Police constables are visible, trying to keep the crowds back, clearing streets for additional equipment. The organised chaos of urban emergency response, all triggered by your bell. You did this. You started this cascade of action, and you did it right. For once, you didn't panic over bakery steam. You correctly identified a real emergency, executed the proper response, and possibly saved lives. The weight of that responsibility, the knowledge that hesitating even 30 seconds might have made the difference between containment and catastrophe settles over you like a physical force. You watch. You wait. You stay ready because the fire isn't out yet, and your shift isn't over. At 8:03 p.m., you remember the speaking tube. In the chaos of spotting the fire and ringing the alarm, you completely forgot about the brass communication pipe that runs from your tower cab down to the street-level command station. It's mounted on the east wall, a polished tube about 3 inches in diameter with a whistle mechanism that alerts ground personnel when you want to communicate. You rush to it now and blow sharply into the mouthpiece. A shrill whistle sounds below. You wait. 5 seconds regulation, protocoled and shout into the tube. Tower to ground. Fire captain, respond. The tube carries sound remarkably well, but there's always a slight echo, a metallic quality that makes voices sound tinny and distant. You hear scratching sounds, then a voice. Ground station, Captain Morris responding. Report. You press your mouth close to the speaking tube. Patterson Warehouse, 4th floor fully involved, fire spreading to roof. Wind southeast at 15 miles per hour, sparks landing on neighbouring structures. Rope warehouse threatened. Recommend additional companies. Received. Dispatch already sent 3 more companies. Continue observation and report any spread beyond the immediate block. Understood. You pull back from the tube, breathing hard. The communication system works, which isn't always guaranteed. Sometimes the tube gets clogged with debris or ice. Sometimes the ground station is unmanned because personnel are fighting the actual fire. But tonight, everything's functioning as designed. You return to the telescope, tracking the fire's evolution. The flames have consumed the entire 4th floor now and are eating through the roof. Firefighters have positioned 3 pumpers in a semicircle around the building, pouring water from multiple angles. The coordination is impressive. Each company knows its role, operates its equipment without interfering with others, and maintains discipline despite the chaos. This is what years of drills and training produces: effective response under extreme pressure. A mainstream historical fact, professional urban fire departments emerged in the mid-19th century, replacing volunteer brigades that were often disorganized and competitive with each other. The transition wasn't smooth. Volunteer firefighters resented being replaced by paid professionals, and political battles over fire department funding consumed city councils for decades. But the results speak for themselves. Your city's professional department can mobilize coordinated responses that volunteer companies simply couldn't match. Through the telescope, you watch individual firefighters executing specific tasks. One group maintains the pumper, keeping steam pressure constant. Another crew manages the hose lines, adjusting positions as the fire shifts. A third team searches the surrounding buildings, evacuating residents and checking for secondary fires. It's like watching a choreographed performance, except the dancers are risking their lives and the stage is actively trying to kill them. You spot a problem. Embers landing on the cotton storage facility 2 buildings south. You blow the speaking tube whistle again. Tower to ground. Go ahead. Morris's voice crackles through the tube. Cotton storage, 2 buildings south. Embers accumulating on roof. Possible ignition in progress. A pause. Then, directing Company 4 to that location. Keep watching. You maintain focus on the cotton warehouse roof through the telescope. 30 seconds later, you see firefighters arriving with a hose, climbing a ladder to access the roof. They spray water across the surface, extinguishing smoldering embers before they can penetrate the roofing materials. The threat is neutralized. Your observation prevented a second major fire. This is the purpose of Firewatch Towers, not just spotting the initial fire, but maintaining comprehensive surveillance during the emergency, seeing threats from your elevated position that ground-level personnel can't detect. Historians still argue whether tower systems justified their cost, but in moments like this, the value is undeniable. You're providing battlefield intelligence, and the commanders below are acting on it. Here's a quirky detail about tower-to-ground communication. Some cities experimented with semaphore systems, visual signals, using flags or lanterns to convey information without speaking tubes. Your tower has the flag equipment, but nobody's been trained to actually use it in years. The flags sit in their cabinet, decorative relics of a communication method that was obsolete before it was ever properly implemented. You continue scanning, reporting anything suspicious. A crowd of onlookers getting too close, you report it. Police move them back. A horse panicking near the fire scene, you report it. Someone leads the animal to safety. A window breaking on the building adjacent to the warehouse, you report it. Firefighters investigate and find no interior fire, just heat damage. Each observation, each report, contributes to the overall management of the crisis. The speaking tube becomes your lifeline to the action below. You're not just a passive observer anymore. You're an active participant in the emergency response, feeding information downward, coordinating resources, helping commanders make tactical decisions. It's exhilarating and terrifying. One wrong report could send companies to the wrong location. One missed observation could allow a fire to spread unchecked. By 8,025 p.m., the main fire appears to be losing its intensity. The flames are still massive, but they're no longer growing. The roof has collapsed. Inward a good sign, actually, because it starves the fire of vertical draft. Water is penetrating deeper into the structure. Black smoke is giving way to grey steam, indicating that water is winning the battle against combustion. You report this to Morris. Tower to ground. Main fire appears contained. Flames diminishing. Heavy steam production. Confirmed from ground level. Morris sounds exhausted but relieved. Maintain watch for hot spots and reignition. We'll be here most of the night. Understood. Tower continuing observation. You step back from the speaking tube and allow yourself a moment of relief. The crisis isn't over, the fire is still burning, and hotspots could reignite for hours, but the immediate catastrophic threat has passed. The waterfront isn't going to burn down tonight. The firefighters have done their job, and you've done yours. Your legs are trembling. You're not sure if it's exhaustion, adrenaline crash, or the cold, but you need to sit down. You collapse into the wooden chair and just breathe for 30 seconds, watching the scene below through tired eyes. 7 fire companies, dozens of firefighters, hundreds of onlookers, all focused on one burning building in a city of 700,000 people. And it all started with you spotting an orange glow and pulling a rope. The speaking tube whistles. You drag yourself upright and answer. Tower here, Morris. Well done tonight. Your early alarm made the difference. Thank you. You're not accustomed to praise. Just doing the job, Captain. Do it this well every time and we might all survive this profession. The tube goes silent. You return to the windows, watching the firefighters continue their work. Somewhere below, in that organized chaos, they're fighting the last remnants of the blaze. And somewhere above, in this cold wooden box, you're watching over them, ready to shout a warning if danger appears. The choreography continues. The industrial ballet of emergency response, with you as the unexpected narrator, speaking coordinates and observations down a brass tube into the night. By 8:47 p.m., you hear the familiar clang of boots on the iron stairs. Your relief is arriving. Jimmy Chen, the evening to midnight watchman, early as usual. Jimmy's the youngest of the tower crew, just 24, and he treats punctuality like a religious obligation. He emerges through the trapdoor, takes one look at the orange glow illuminating the western sky, and whistles low. Damn, that's the Patterson warehouse, isn't it? Was the Patterson warehouse, you correct, stepping aside so he can see the full scope. Mostly contained now, but they'll be pouring water on it all night. District 23, full response, 7 companies on scene. Jimmy moves to the telescope and surveys the damage. You rang it in, 7:41 p.m. Perfect execution. You can't help the small note of pride in your voice. No bakery steam this time? He grins, and you flip him an obscene gesture that makes him laugh. Seriously though, good work. That could have taken the whole waterfront. You give him the full briefing when conditions, which buildings are threatened, where the companies are positioned, the speaking tube protocol Morris established. Jimmy listens intently, occasionally making notes in the logbook. This is the handover ritual, the formal transfer of responsibility. Once you descend those stairs, the city becomes Jimmy's problem, not yours. Ground station still manned, you conclude. Morris said they'll maintain command presence through the night. You'll probably be on speaking tube duty most of your shift. Better than watching pigeons. Jimmy shrugs out of his co-authors, still warm from the climb, and settles into position at the west window. Go home. You look like death. You don't argue. You gather your empty lunch pail, pull on your coat, and descend through the trap door. Your legs protest every step, muscles cramping after 16 hours of near constant use. The spiral staircase seems twice as long going down as it did coming up, and by the 4th floor landing, you're gripping the rail hard to avoid stumbling. But you're not going home. Not yet. At ground level, you bypass the exit and push through a narrow door marked Watchman Only, No Admittance. This leads to the tower's base. Quarters are cramped, dingy space that serves as combination break room, sleeping quarters, and storage area for the tower crew. It's barely 15 feet square, with a low ceiling that forces taller men to duck. The air smells like old coffee, tobacco, and unwashed bedding. A mainstream historical fact, working-class housing in industrial cities was notoriously cramped and unsanitary, but firewatch quarters were often worse because they were afterthoughts, spaces carved from building infrastructure rather than designed for human habitation. Your tower quarters weren't originally intended for sleeping, they were storage for equipment. Someone added cots later, and the city grudgingly accepted that watchmen needed somewhere to rest between shifts. 2 narrow cots occupied the back wall, wedged between equipment cabinets and water barrels. Pete sprawled on one, snoring thunderously, dead to the world after his overnight shift. His boots are still on, mud-caked and untied. A blanket half covers his body, and his mouth hangs open in a way that would be comical if it wasn't so profoundly exhausted. You claim the second cot, which sags alarmingly under your weight. The mattress is a thin pad stuffed with straw that's probably older than you are, covered by a sheet that's grey from insufficient washing. A wool blanket, your personal property, brought from home, provides the only real warmth. The pillow is a folded coat that smells like the previous occupant. Here's a quirky detail about tower sleeping arrangements. In some cities, watchmen aren't allowed to sleep on site at all, required to return home between shifts regardless of distance. Your city permits on-site rest as a practical accommodation, which really means they don't want to pay enough for you to afford housing close to the tower. So you sleep here 2 or 3 nights a week, saving the long walk home for days when you have energy for it. You unlace your boots with numb fingers and pull them off. Your feet are pale and wrinkled, compressed from 16 hours in leather. You massage them briefly, trying to restore circulation, then give up and just collapse onto the cot. The ceiling is stained and water damaged, with a prominent crack that's been slowly expanding since you started this job. You've watched that crack grow. It's like a very slow, very boring science experiment. Sleep should come immediately. You're exhausted beyond measure, but your mind won't shut down. The fire replays in your head, the orange glow, the bell-ringing sequence, the speaking tube reports, the firefighters swarming the scene. You executed perfectly. No mistakes. No hesitation. For once, you did the job exactly as it's supposed to be done. But sleep still won't come, so you do what watchmen have done in this room for years. You wait for someone to wake up and play cards. Pete stirs around 9,003 p.m., emerging from sleep like a surfacing submarine's low, disoriented and vaguely threatening. He blinks at the ceiling, registers your presence, and grunts. "Heard the bells," he croaks. "Warehouse? Patterson Timber. Major fire, contained. You ring it?" "Yeah, good." Pete sits up, scratches vigorously at his beard, and begins the process of finding his boots. "Cards? This is the ritual. Between shifts, while waiting for sleep or killing time before the next climb, watchmen play cards. It's the social glue that holds the tower crew together, the shared activity that makes this job slightly less isolating. Pete keeps a deck in the equipment cabinet, cards so worn the suits are barely distinguishable. You drag yourself upright. Poker? Can't play poker with 2 people. Rummy. Pete retrieves the cards and a small folding table that lids behind the water barrels. You sit on opposite cots, the table between you, and Pete deals with practiced efficiency. The cards whisper across the scarred wood surface. You organize your hand, 3 sevens, 2 unrelated cards. Decent start. Historians still argue whether off-duty fraternization improved watchman performance or just created opportunities for gambling and drinking. But you know the truth. Without these card games, the isolation would drive everyone insane. You spend 12 hours alone in a tower, then return to equally lonely home lives. These games are the only genuine social interaction some watchmen get all week. You play in comfortable silence, broken only by card slaps and occasional grunts. Pete wins the first hand. You win the second. The third game stalls into a stalemate that neither of you can break. The cards cycle through discards and draws, neither player able to complete their sets. "Heard the new recruit ran screaming," Pete says, discarding a queen. Didn't run, just looked terrified. You draw from the pile. Useless card. Won't last a month. They never do. Pete studies his hand. Remember Thompson from Tower 6? The resignation letter guy? That guy. Lasted 3 weeks. Pete discards. City's getting desperate. Can't find anyone willing to climb stairs and stare at smoke for $9 a week. $8.50 once they cut our wages. Jesus, don't remind me. Pete lays down his hand 3 nines and a run of clubs. Rummy. You toss your cards down in defeat. Pete gathers the deck, shuffles with theatrical flair, and deals again. The ritual continues. Cards, conversation, companionable silence. Outside, the city carries on its nocturnal business. Above, Jimmy watches from the tower. Below, Pete and you play rummy on a wobbly table in a room that smells like defeat and old socks. This is the unglamorous reality of Firewatch life. Not the dramatic bell-ringing moments, but the endless in-between hours. The cramped quarters, the exhausted sleep on terrible mattresses, the card games with co-workers who become your only friends because nobody else understands what this job does to you. Pete wins again. You're too tired to care. Your eyes are closing despite the discomfort of sitting upright. Pete notices. Get some sleep. You look like hell. You don't argue. You collapse back onto the cot, pull the blanket over yourself, and close your eyes. Pete's shuffling cards, preparing for solitaire. The sound is oddly soothing, the soft whisper of cardboard on wood, rhythmic and mindless. Sleep finally comes, dragging you down into darkness. And tomorrow you'll climb those stairs again and do it all over, because that's the job. That's the only job you've got. You wake at 3:47 a.m. to the sound of Pete leaving for his overnight shift, his boots clanging up the iron stairs. For a moment you're disoriented, the cramped quarters, the darkness, the lingering smell of smoke from your clothes. Then memory returns, the fire, the successful alarm, the card games, sleep. You're in the tower quarters because going home seemed like too much effort. Now you lie awake on this miserable cot, staring at the cracked ceiling, and think about money. Specifically, about not having enough of it. $8.50 per week. That's what you'll earn after the city implements its planned wage cut. Divided across 6 12-hour shifts, that works out to roughly 24 cents per hour. A factory worker makes 30 cents. A shop clerk makes 35. You're a trained professional responsible for protecting 700,000 lives, and you earn less than someone who sweeps floors. The math is brutal and unavoidable. Rent on your 2-room tenement apartment, $3 per week. Food for yourself, your wife, and 2 children, $2.50 if you're careful, $3 if you're realistic. Coal for heating and cooking, 75 cents. That leaves $1.25 for everything else. Clothing, shoes, medical expenses, occasional luxuries like soap or a newspaper. $1.25 as a buffer against disaster, against illness, against the 1,000 small emergencies that plague working-class life. A mainstream historical fact, in the 1880s, financial experts estimated that a family of 4 in an American industrial city required a minimum of $12 weekly for basic subsistence. You're earning $8.50. The gap between your income and survival isn't theoretical, it's the concrete reason your children wear hand-me-down clothes and your wife takes in laundry to earn extra pennies. You married Clara 6 years ago when you worked in the textile mill and had prospects of becoming a shift supervisor. That job paid $11 weekly and came with occasional bonuses. Then the mill mechanized, eliminated half its workforce, and you scrambled for any employment available. The Firewatch position was supposed to be temporary, a stopgap until something better appeared. 2 years later, you're still climbing this tower, and nothing better has appeared. And Clara is pregnant again, your 3rd child, due in March, which will increase expenses while providing no additional income for at least 6 years, when the child becomes old enough for factory work. The arithmetic is relentless. Here's what the City Council doesn't understand when they cut your wages. You can't just work harder or be more efficient. There's no productivity bonus for spotting fires correctly. There's no commission structure for preventing conflagrations. You earn exactly $8.50 regardless of whether you save the waterfront or stare at pigeons all shift. The incentive structure is completely divorced from performance, and the public perception is worse than the wages. To most citizens, fire watchmen are either invisible or objects of contempt. The invisible part you understand. People don't think about infrastructure that works correctly. When there are no fires, nobody credits the watchman. When there are fires, people assume you're incompetent for not preventing them. It's a noun proposition, but the contempt is harder to stomach. You've been called lazy to your face multiple times, usually by well-dressed merchants who can't conceive that watching requires actual effort. You just sit up there all day. One particularly offensive specimen informed you, "My dog could do your job." You'd tried explaining the skill involved in smoke identification, the physical demands of 12-hour shifts, the mental strain of sustained vigilance. He'd laughed and walked away. The paranoid label comes from false alarms. Ring the bell for bakery steam 3 times, and suddenly you're the watchman who panics at shadows, the nervous incompetent who wastes city resources. Never mind that false alarms are better than missed fires. Never mind that distinguishing normal smoke from dangerous smoke is genuinely difficult. You're judged by your failures, never by your successes. Historians still argue whether fire watchmen were undervalued professionals or overpaid loafers, which tells you something about how wildly perceptions varied. The insurance industry considered watchmen essential and lobbied for their expansion. City councils considered them expensive luxuries and constantly threatened cuts. Citizens ranged from grateful to hostile, depending on whether they'd recently experienced a fire. The social isolation compounds the economic hardship. You can't afford the activities that build community Taven visits. Church socials, fraternal organization memberships all cost money you don't have. Your wife can't participate in women's clubs because the membership fees are beyond your budget. Your children attend the factory school, which is free but marks them as poor among their slightly less poor peers. Even within the working class, there's a hierarchy, and you're near the bottom. Skilled tradesmen, carpenters, machinists, printers look down on unskilled labor. Unskilled factory workers look down on service workers. Service workers look down on the truly desperate. And everyone looks down on fire watchmen who are seen as men without useful skills, last resort employees doing a job nobody respects. Here's a quirky economic detail that captures the absurdity. The city spends more annually on mayoral entertaining expenses than on the entire Firewatch Tower system salaries combined. The mayor's wine budget exceeds your yearly earnings. You learned this by reading budget documents posted in the city clerk's office, and the knowledge sits in your stomach like a stone. You've considered quitting. You've considered quitting. Of course you've considered it. Every watchman considers it. But quitting requires having another job to quit toward, and employment options for 32-year-old men with minimal education are limited. You can read and write, which puts you ahead of many, but you lack trade skills or formal apprenticeship. The factory jobs pay marginally better, but offer even worse conditions. 14-hour shifts in deafening noise, breathing cotton dust or chemical fumes, constant risk of dismemberment from machinery. So you stay in the tower. You climb the stairs 6 days a week. You watch smoke and ring bells and try not to think too hard about how you're one illness, one injury, one economic downturn away from complete destitution. Clara understands, or tries to. She doesn't complain, at least not to you, but you've seen her counting pennies at the kitchen table, rearranging the same coins into different configurations as though mathematical creativity could somehow produce more money. You've watched her let out the seams on your son's pants because buying new ones is impossible. You've heard her explaining to your daughter why they can't afford the penny candy other children buy. The pregnancy terrifies you. Another mouth to feed, another body to clothe, another future to somehow provide for on wages that don't cover present needs. You love your children desperately, but love doesn't put food on the table, and you're running out of strategies for stretching inadequate resources across expanding obligations. The ceiling crack seems wider in the darkness. Or maybe it's always been this wide and you're just noticing. You should try to sleep, have another shift starting in 13 hours, but your mind won't settle. The numbers keep cycling through your head. 850 minus 3 minus 250 minus 75 equals not enough. The answer is always not enough. At 4023 a.m., you abandon sleep entirely. Pete's overhead now, beginning his shift, and you can hear his boots creaking on the floorboards above. There's no point lying here calculating poverty. You rise, splash cold water on your face from the basin, and prepare yourself mentally for the ritual you've been dreading, carrying the bucket down the stairs. The bucket sits behind the privacy screen where you left it yesterday morning, lid tightly sealed. You approach it with the resignation of a condemned man approaching the gallows. This is the worst part of the job, worse than the boredom, worse than the cold, worse even than the wage situation. This is the price of working in an infrastructure that predates indoor plumbing. You grasp the handle carefully, keeping the bucket level. The contents slosh slightly, despite your caution. The weight is manageable, but the psychological burden is immense. You're a grown man carrying a bucket of human waste down 7 flights of narrow stairs in the dark. There's no dignity here, no glory, just you and a bucket and gravity hoping nothing spills. The descent is an exercise in intense concentration. Each step requires precise foot placement on the perforated iron. You keep the bucket close to your body, moving slowly, breathing through your mouth. The spiral staircase seems endless, each turn revealing another flight of identical steps stretching downward. Your free hand grips the rail hard enough to hurt. 4th floor landing. You pause, adjust your grip, continue. 3rd floor, 2nd floor. Your arm is burning from maintaining the bucket's level position. 1st floor, ground level. You've made it without incident, which feels like a genuine accomplishment even though it's literally just walking downstairs with a container. The waste pit is behind the tower, a deep hole covered by a wooden platform with a hinged lid. Municipal workers are supposed to empty it monthly, though supposed to and actually do are very different things. You lift the lid, averting your face from the smell, and dump the bucket's contents into the darkness below. The splash echoes unpleasantly. You replace the lid, rinse the bucket at the pump cold water, minimal soap, good enough, and set it beside the tower entrance for the next shift. There. The ritual is complete. You're free to go home. Your bicycle leans against the tower's brick base where you left it yesterday morning. It's a second-hand machine purchased from a pawn shop for $2 you couldn't afford, but it's transformed your commute from a 40-minute walk to a 15-minute ride. The saddle is cracked leather. The chain needs oil. One pedal squeaks rhythmically, but it rolls, which is all that matters. You mount the bicycle and push off into the pre-dawn darkness. The streets are nearly empty, just you and the lamplighters finishing their rounds, extinguishing the gas lamps as natural light begins creeping over the eastern horizon. Your route takes you through the manufacturing district, past the textile mill where you used to work, along the canal where barges are already being loaded for the day's commerce. A mainstream historical fact. Bicycles revolutionized urban mobility in the 1880s and 1890s, particularly for working-class men who couldn't afford horses or carriages. The safety bicycle, with equal-sized wheels and chain drive, the design you're riding, became affordable enough for labourers around 1880, fundamentally changing how people navigated cities. Your bicycle represents freedom, even if it's freedom to commute between poverty at home and tedium at work. The streets gradually fill with early workers heading to factory shifts. You nod at familiar faces. The baker arriving to fire his ovens, the milkman beginning his rounds, the street sweepers clearing yesterday's debris. These are your people, the invisible workers who keep cities functioning while more prosperous citizens sleep. You're all part of the same machinery, different gears in the same grinding system. Your tenement building appears ahead, a 5-story brick structure that houses 48 families in varying states of desperation. You dismount, carry the bicycle up 2 flights of exterior stairs, leaving it on the street, invites theft, and lean it against the wall outside your apartment door. Inside, Clara is already awake, feeding the coal stove, preparing breakfast. She turns when you enter, and her expression softens. You smell like smoke. There was a fire. Patterson Warehouse. I rang it incorrectly. You can't help the pride in your voice. Of course you did. She kisses your cheek, ignoring the grime. Sit. I'll make eggs. The apartment is 2 rooms, a main space that serves as kitchen, dining room and living area, and a bedroom where all 4 of you sleep. The walls are thin enough to hear neighbours arguing. The windows are drafty. The floor slopes noticeably toward the south corner. But it's home, and Clara has made it as warm and clean as poverty allows. You sit at the small table and watch her cook. She's showing now, the pregnancy visible in her profile. March is 4 months away. 4 months to somehow find more money, more resources, more of everything you don't have. But right now, you're home. You're off shift. And Clara is making eggs in a castillon pan that belonged to her grandmother, and the morning light is filtering through the window, and for this brief moment, the mathematics of survival can wait. You eat breakfast together in comfortable silence. The eggs are. Good Clara's some kind of wizard with even the cheapest ingredients. Your son stumbles out of the bedroom, hair disheveled, and climbs into your lap without speaking. Your daughter follows, rubbing sleep from her eyes. This is why you climb those stairs, why you watch smoke for 12 hours, why you endure the boredom and cold and contempt. Not for $8.50 a week, not for the glory of the job, for this, for them, for the ordinary miracle of breakfast together in a shabby apartment that's somehow enough. After eating, you collapse into bed while Clara organizes the children for their day. Sleep comes quickly now, deep and dreamless, the exhaustion finally claiming you. And tomorrow you'll climb those stairs again. You'll scan for smoke. You'll ring bells if necessary. You'll do it all over again, because that's what you do. That's who you are, a watchman, a father, a man doing his best with what he's given. The tower waits, the city waits, but for now, you sleep. The morning light grows softer as you drift deeper into rest, the sounds of the waking city fading to a gentle murmur beyond your window. Clara's quiet movements, the children's whispered voices, the distant clatter of horses on cobblestones, all of it blends into a soothing background hum that carries you further from consciousness. In your dreams there are no towers, no smoke, no bells to ring. There's just warm stillness, the kind of deep peace that comes only after exhaustion has been fully spent. Your muscles release their tension. Your mind stops its endless calculations. For these precious hours, you're not a watchman or a provider or a man worried about wages. You're simply sleep itself, formless and quiet. The city continues its rhythms without you. Someone else watches from the tower now. Someone else scans for smoke. The work continues, because the work always continues, an endless cycle of vigilance that no single person can maintain alone. But your part is finished for today. Let the numbers rest. Let the worries wait. Let the bucket and the bells and the bakery steam all fade into the background where they belong. You've done your work. You've earned this rest. The tower will still be there tomorrow, patient and unchanging, waiting for you to climb its iron stairs once more. But tomorrow is far away, and right now, in this moment, you're home. You're safe. You're sleeping the deep, dreamless sleep of someone who has nothing left to give and can finally, gratefully, let go. The city watches over itself for a while. You've done enough. Sleep now. Just sleep. Everything else can wait until you wake. And when you do wake, there will be more stairs to climb, more smoke to watch, more vigilance required. But not yet, not now. For now, there's only this: warmth, darkness, rest, and the quiet certainty that morning will come when it comes, and you'll be ready when it does. Sweet dreams, watchman, you've earned them.